In the background of an incredibly beautiful building, two figures are seen wearing kimonos and preparing for battle. A man in a purple kimono with a katana in his hand confidently asserted that no one in this place was capable of opposing him, and he had come here to prove that he was the best in the world. But here, he's met someone as capable as the black-clad John Doe, and he doesn't regret being involved at all. The man in the purple kimono made a sharp lunge towards his opponent, hoping to strike first. Boldly and confidently, the man in the purple kimono orders his opponent to become rust on his sword. But the unknown man in black, just seconds later, delivers one clear punch that sends him into a knockout. Claiming that there was very little difference between them, he decided to leave his opponent lying behind him. But he couldn't leave quietly. He turned his head back and noticed that the body of the defeated man was suddenly gone. Suddenly, the announcer excitedly announces into the microphone that the winner took no damage for the fight and retains his title without injury, adding that the participant of the final duel between the spectators arranged by Planet Man is a genius player student from Black Skull High School. In the early 2000s, there was a huge upheaval in the real world due to the emergence of a virtual reality world called intersectionality. Intersection has a diverse content of the world concept. It represented all kinds of spheres and brought about changes in the present reality. Among the many worlds that intersected was the massive multiplayer role-playing game world of Heroes of Time. This is a story telling about the heroes called players appeared in the world of danger. People can personally experience this great fantasy world with the ability to raid a boss, to storm a fortress, to compete in a contest, and a host of other exciting content. This multifaceted world has reached a point where people from all over the world have begun to marvel at it. Heroes of Time is admired by all gamers and dreams of becoming better pro gamers. At the same moment, in the school building, students were vigorously discussing the new airing of Planet Man. One of them asked his interlocutor Lee Hyun-jun if he only had the finale left, while the cocky guy asked Hyun-jun if he would take Planet Man's autograph for him. They also wondered what they could do to play so well, to which Hyun-jun replied with indifference that it wasn't enough to just dodge enemy attacks and hit with their own. Hyun-jun is the same Black Skull who made it to the finals of the competition between viewers of the popular streamer Planet Man. He not only has excellent skills in the game, but also excellent intelligence in reality, and even omnipotence in sports. Hyun-jun was born into a wealthy family and had good looks. He thought he was perfect. The guys continued to discuss Hyun-jun's progress, and were also surprised that his level of synchronization with the special program was 200%, which was almost professional level. The level of synchronization 100% conveys a sense of reality. In addition, it is said that if this value is high, you can experience extrasensory perception. The cocky guy noted that Hyun-jun was very fast in the arena and said that he thought it was right to say whoever was predestined would get everything. He also added that this world is very unfair because there are those who will not achieve anything, no matter how hard they try. Saying all this, he sat and looked at the back of his interlocutor, whom he later called a loser. He took the loser by the head and told him to keep his balance, because if he fell, something bad could happen. One of them said he was crazy for doing it in their classroom, but the defiant boy only pointed out that his mom was the head of the PTA and he would not get anything for it. And at the moment of the guy's further insults, Hyun-jun's leg swung. And a second later, that same foot kicked the humiliated guy on top of the defiant guy still sitting on top of him. With a rumble and scream, they both collapsed to the floor, creating a great noise. Although the culprit turned out to be a completely different person, the impertinent fellow brought all the accusations down on him. He also added that now he was going to have a hard time, and drops of cold sweat broke out on the poor man's face. And Hyun-jun chuckled at him, only noting how sad the life of a loser is. The poor man's glasses lay beside him on the floor. He was already covered in sweat, expecting the worst. This world is strictly subject to the laws of natural selection. The strong always have a special right to humiliate the weak they are, because they don't even have any means of resistance. Even though the world is evolving and there are more opportunities for entertainment, nothing beats the most fun. Looking down haughtily at the defeated man's despairing face, Hyun-jun's opponent in the finals will be a player who can easily change his profession to match his opponent. Hyun-jun immediately realized that his opponent would also choose a juggernaut capable of exchanging powerful attacks as an assassin. Realizing that the battle would not be easy, he launched Crossing. The crowd shouted enthusiastically, anticipating the long-awaited fight, which promised to be intense. Planet Man excitedly announced that the finals would soon begin, with the two most capable players qualifying. The rules of the competition are similar to Heroes of Time level equipment and characteristics are equalized, differ only professions and abilities, and the main thing in battle tactics and physical strength. Then, under the announcer's announcements, Black Skull enters the arena in his legendary black outfit. He is a specialist assassin who can boast of his past fights without any injuries. Black Skull defeats opponents using the strongest blows, assassin speed, and the ability to deftly dodge. Planet Man notes that in real life, the Black Skull is just a middle school student, but he is confident that in the future, he will become a truly intimidating gamer. Pointing to the second gate, the host announces the next finalist. In the arena confidently enters Ark, famous for the fact that freely uses a variety of professions and easily make a disadvantageous approach to the opponent. The question on everyone's mind is what profession he chose against the Black Skull assassin. By his attire, it is immediately clear to everyone that his chosen profession is that of a magician. Against the assassin that was Black Skull, the mage was the weakest class. Planet Man immediately asked Ark if that was his strategy, but he immediately said it wasn't. With arrogance in his voice, he said that he thought an assassin of that level could be defeated, even by a mage. The host noted Ark's provocation and asked him if he really thought he could easily take down the Black Skull. During what was the countdown to the start of the fight, Ark told Black Skull that he too was still in high school. But is not Black Skull too much in the syndrome of an 8th grader because the skull mask that was worn on his face seemed too childish whether this was his concept. And as soon as the start sounded, the balls of magical power rushed towards the Black Skull, sparkling with bright flashes. Ark continues to fire magic, and the Black Skull rapidly pursues him, while the host notes that the fight began with the usual pattern for a fight between a mage and an assassin. The assassin is puzzled. He can't figure out if the mage really thinks he can win just by shooting magic at him. Black Skull continued to deftly dodge his opponent's attacks at an incredibly fast speed, while the announcer commented on what was happening. Ark's confidence was slowly fading as the assassin dodged his attacks, and the fact that he had chosen the mage class for the battle could have been a fatal mistake. Ark instantly decides to stop and gets into a threatening stance in front of his opponent, thus getting closer to him. With madness in his eyes, Black Skull comes to the conclusion that with this maneuver, his opponent is just trying to attract the attention of the audience. With an impressive leap, he swings at Ark to use his ability and strike him from behind, wanting to make him regret the decision to enter this fight. But Ark only grinned in response, his face spreading into an evil grin. He said with the same grin that he didn't think his opponent would fall for his trick so easily. Directing a beam of bright magic towards his opponent, he says that you can't play with emotion. And then the realization came to Black Skull that the decrease in distance had been planned and he was trapped. With a violent rumble, however, the assassin falls to his knees already without strength. However, his opponent is full of strength and only wonders if the Black Skull didn't think about the fact that he knows all abilities, and including assassins, and now his status without injury is destroyed. But at this point, he seems to have to worry if an assassin loses to a weak mage. Black Skull jumps to his feet and notes that Ark is too much of a big deal for a weakling like him, because he can't beat him with one attack like that. In spite of his injury, he dissolves in the blink of an eye and disappears into the arena, leaving Ark standing alone in the middle of the battlefield in bewilderment. Applying a critical ability, namely a surprise attack from the darkness, Black Skull finds himself at his opponent's back with only one thought to win this fight. But he in turn only scoffs and doubts the honesty of the assassin's technique. Ark condensed a mass of energy over his hand and said he had also saved one ability for this moment. The host realizes in incredible suspense that this is once again explosive magic that is quite slow. Even though Ark is at a disadvantage, the decisive moment will be the first attack made. Black Skull's face was already showing veins of anger, and he couldn't believe that someone could be above a talent like him. By increasing the synchronization, he slowed down time almost to a standstill. This caused Black Skull to deliver a devastating blow to his opponent's leg. His hair was tousled from the speed at which he was moving, and his eyes glittered with anger. However, as he approaches, Ark's hand blocks Black Skull's path. The look of horror on his face, he certainly didn't expect Ark to be able to fight back. Condensing over his palm, the club of magic Ark holds that, indeed, sometimes it seems that when crossing it, time has stopped, and sometimes that you are capable of anything. With a mad grin on his face, he pronounces how sad the life of a loser is. Black Skull can hardly believe what he just heard. Still standing in a daze, Black Skull finds himself under a powerful flow of magic. At the same moment, the game closes, and Black Skull finds himself in reality. With incredible anger, he realizes that he seems to have failed. Immediately, he rips the helmet off his head and tosses it away. At the same time, in the computer club, the guy who was called a loser in his class only reached out. His name was Pak Noah, and even though in the real world he was considered a loser in the virtual world, he was a master whose skills were admired. With a smirk on his face, all he could think about was how Black Skull would react to his defeat at school. A confident-looking man sitting in a chair with a serious expression was flipping through photos of guys and girls on his tablet. A hand appeared next to his head with a hot mug of coffee in it. The one who brought it was Kim's assistant, who wondered if a new candidate had been chosen to join the academy. Of course, he respects the interests of his interlocutor and realizes that giving less well-off people a chance is a good thing, and he has one candidate too. Holding out his tablet, Kim mentioned yesterday's broadcast featuring one capable and interesting person. On the screen of the tablet was Ark, whose level of synchronization in the shown passage was very high. The man in the glasses was shocked. He suggested that perhaps an illegal program had tapped into the crossing. Asking Kim's assistant if there were any unfinished plans on his schedule, the man's gaze fell on his helmet. He was set to connect to the game to see if this level of synchronization could actually exist. Meanwhile, at school, Pak Noah was once again enduring the bullying of his classmates. He was kicked near garbage cans where the oppressive atmosphere merged with the stench to create a sense of hopelessness. The man who beat up Pak Noah was none other than Hyunjun, who had lost to him the day before. The classmates standing in the back were discussing that Pak Noah had intentionally stripped Hyunjun of the title without injury and mentioned that he was also a middle school student so that he could have a chance to get into the academy. Hyunjun kept going over the words he had said in his head. He realized that after his defeat, Ark, that is, Pak Noah had just repeated his words, expressing the thought of how sad the life of a loser was. His thoughts were interrupted by the words of a trembling Pak Noah, who said he didn't know what had happened and apologized. The expression on Hyunjun's face immediately changed from anger to consternation and shock. Assuming that Ark was not actually Pak Noah, he and his classmates move away, leaving a lying on the floor, Pak Noah looking exhausted behind him. As soon as their footsteps fell silent, Pak Noah burst into laughter with a smile on his face. After all, he understood more than anyone how much Hyunjun was infuriated by his defeat. Despite the fact that in real life, Pak Noah has been bullied by Hyunjun and his company since he entered school, he has been striving to build up his skills in the game so that he can at least defeat the bully there. And while he felt better in the game, his school life remained just as disgusting. Thinking over everything that had happened earlier, Pak Noah's thoughts were interrupted by the teacher. He stood up from his desk with a haggard look, and it was immediately obvious that something had happened. The teacher's face immediately changed, and she didn't know if she should continue to ask the student anything. But she pretended not to notice Pak Noah's condition and asked the question she wanted. Pak Noah immediately realized that he could not rely on his teacher's help and would have to deal with the situation on his own. After all, the teacher knows exactly whose work it is, but since Hyunjun and his company are from good families, they always turn a blind eye to all their shenanigans. Immediately, all the classmates around and the teacher herself turned into monsters from computer games in Pak Noah's eyes. Reality is not as good as it seems. Everything around you looks so not real. His classmates reminded him so much of the goblins from the game, as nasty and horrible, not only in appearance, but inside as well. To relieve the stress of arriving home, he immediately plugged in Crossing and went into Heroes of Time with the goal of destroying as many enemies as possible. Enjoying this moment, he defeated all the monsters in his way with full concentration, and he was instantly relieved he had forgotten the problems of real life, albeit temporarily. Once again, Pak Noah is convinced that the virtual world is his element, and here he really feels like himself. In Heroes of Time, there are 3 classes, Tank Fighter and Support. Choosing a profession take into account that the class cannot be pumped with the increase of level, so it is important to make the right choice. At one time, Ark gave his class preference to a class such as the Fighter. His skill and knowledge of the mechanics of the class allowed Pak Noah to defeat many opponents. Crossing became an outlet for many, and one of the reasons it became known as another world was the money from the various worlds within it. And importantly, they could be exchanged for real money, but only after reaching adulthood, which Pak Noah planned to do. As he continued to watch his gambling earnings, and behind him, he felt someone's presence. Pak Noah sensed something wrong and decided to look around to check. He was about to turn around when a spear flew near his head, almost hitting him. The unknown man was chagrined by his failure and only snorted after his attempted strike. But it seemed he had not come alone, for a voice from the other side expressed surprise that Panoa had managed to dodge. There were a lot of them, and they all had guns, so it looks like they came to Pak Noah's place. He was puzzled, for Ark did not know who they were, much less why they were attacking so suddenly. In answer to his question, one of the strangers asserted that they had come for Pak Noah's gold. From the chatter coming from the crowd, Pak Noah assumed that his opponents were zombies. These are the players who are hired by others for a fee, and there are even rumors of zombies in real life being debtors or in jail at all. The red eyes of one of the strangers indicated that he was an assassin. While watching this, Pak Noah remembered that killing each other among the players had become more frequent lately, but he threatened his opponents without letting on. In response, they continued to sarcasm and provoke Pak Noah, who was already on edge. And while they were saying it was easier for Ark to just give up, he was considering their tactics. Realizing that if he tried to resist them, he would be at a disadvantage, he decided to flee. A second later, however, he is stopped by a figure flying straight in his direction. But he manages to fend off the attack with his blades, deftly blocking the blow and preventing it from hitting him in the back. Then he went on the attack, throwing his opponent aside. Not noticing another attack from the next opponent, he fails to defend himself against it and misses a single blow that landed on his shoulder. At this point, the crowd is cheering. They are happy to have done some damage and are determined to finish what they started. Ark doesn't give up and decides it's more profitable to become an assassin, losing a lot, or surrender, and get a small percentage of the defeat penalty. And at that moment, glittering spears rush towards him, aimed with terrifying accuracy. However, by immediately orienting himself, he instantly parries all attacks. The whole crowd was confused. They thought that Ark was weakened and would no longer be able to fight the former pressure. All that drives him is this idea that he must be strong and not back down, at least in virtual reality. He is confident in his abilities, because against him is only a pathetic bunch of zombies. Ark is furious. He intends to make them regret messing with him. For here he is not weak. Ark intends to demonstrate his strength and accuracy. Swiftly moving towards the opponents with blade in hand, he suddenly appears in front of them, depriving them of the opportunity to prepare a defense and completely throwing them off balance. Resolute rushes forward, attempting to strike one of them. But the second his hands start to shake, Ark doesn't understand why he couldn't make it. Ark's thoughts are interrupted by the voice of his opponent, who couldn't imagine that Ark would fall for it and believe he was a zombie like everyone else. The guy with the armband went on about how sorry he was, but now Ark had become an assassin, and what to do about it. Meanwhile, in the bright moonlight, a black crow was flying swiftly, and landed smoothly on the arm in heavy metal armor, the hand of a blonde-haired man standing on the edge of a cliff in the heart of the forest. Immediately, a bright projection turned on from the crow's eye and into the air. Looking at her, the masked man with teeth and tusks mumbled thoughtfully. With the words found on the projection showed a picture of Ark, whose face was distorted with a strange expression. Parallel to that, Ark was still standing in front of the masked guy. The tension was still palpable. Full of anger, Ark couldn't figure out what was wrong with his opponent. But what Ark realized, without a second thought, was that the masked guy was clearly not weak. The guy with the armband noticed that Ark had done well with the crowd, but now he had even more work for him, and with those words he rushed towards Ark. Counting on the fact that Ark's bag was overflowing with items, the guy with the armband was determined to defeat him. Ark watched the guy's every move, warily analyzing his actions carefully. He bounces sharply to the side, hoping to avoid the attack and buy time. Ark's face contorted in pain as the masked man managed to reach his neck and strike. The masked guy grinned mockingly, unable to understand where all of Ark's determination had gone. Pak Noah realized that his reaction was not fast enough compared to his opponent's attacks. Even though he could see them, his body still did not keep up. But he does not despair because he knows that it is possible to surpass the opponent, even with a basic specification. Suddenly, all of his attention turns to the broken blade flying off the sword to the side. The masked man slyly remarks that although Ark's level is not high, his physics are good. He also assumes that Ark is a schoolboy. Continuing to provoke Ark and calling him baby, the masked man urges him to go do his homework, which makes Ark genuinely furious. A sudden bright flash blinds them both, causing them to lose their bearings. Once they both come to their senses, notice how the tall-looking man impedes the blade of the guy with the blindfold. Gritting his teeth, the guy with the bandage immediately wondered who the man was who had suddenly interfered in their fight with Ark. In response, he only apologizes for interfering and says he has business with Ark too. Without hesitation, he mentions aloud the recent competition Ark was in. The interested man asks if Ark used illegal programs, to which Ark bewilderedly repeats his words and denies any involvement. And the masked guy paralleling their conversation is indignant and still can't understand how an unknown man dared to interfere in their showdown. A sharp flash of light silences him for a moment. They were both blinded for a second. It made the masked guy shake with surprise and fear. A second later, the masked man's blade was at his throat, and his gaze was directed towards Ark, and he assumed Ark could raise his synchronization level to 400%. Even if that was really true, Ark couldn't believe the man's words. He didn't believe he was able to increase the level of synchronization that much. Recalling the moment from the broadcast, the masked man actually confirmed that Ark's synchronization level at the time of the last attack had exceeded that value. Still in the same position, he claimed that such a number had never been recorded and that Ark really hadn't used a program to artificially increase the level. In response, Ark only said that changing the synchronization level was a fee, so he had never done it. The man couldn't believe his words. You could see by the look on Ark's face that he was puzzled by the man's statements. At the same instant, a talking chest appears behind Ark with a bright glow. It was an NPC in charge of running the World of Time heroes named Mimimic, who claimed that there was a suspected illegal software in the area. Ark assumed that the NPS was talking to him, and more questions popped into his head as he saw him for the first time. The NPS immediately asked Ark to repeat the suspicious action, to which Ark shouted that he didn't know anything about suspicious actions and suggested Mimic to punish the culprit by pointing at the masked guy. With a disgruntled look on his face, Mimic demanded that Ark comply, warning that if he refused, his crossing profile would be permanently blocked for using illegal programs. Ark was outraged by Mimic's last words, because he said it despite the fact that Ark had already made it clear that he had never used illegal programs. The masked man claims that if Ark didn't do it, it's pretty simple, extending his hand towards Ark, asking to be proven right. The man puts his sword directly into Ark's hands, showing that he will have to prove it in battle. Without missing an opportunity, the guy with the armband, Riley, says that he wondered why low-level Ark was holding up so well. Isn't he a cheater? Turning to the masked man with the same ridiculous tone, he asks if he and Ark will now be in the way, to which the masked man simply agrees. And the guy with the armband says he's going to take care of this cheater. Shouting that now all items belonging to Ark would now become his bandage guy, quickly headed towards Ark. Reflecting the enemy's attacks, the already shocked Pak Noah tried to pull himself together. In his head, he just kept repeating that he never measured his level of synchronization and just lived thinking it was a little better than the rest of the players. Remembering that Hyunjun's synchronization was around 200%, Ark realized in shock that his synchronization was twice that of Black Skull. And since there hasn't been a player with a synchronization rate over 400% so far, that means only one thing. Ark is number one in the world. And while the bandage guy's face was full of anger, Ark's face lit up with joy. He had just realized that he was indeed special. Focusing on how he felt, Pak Noah was determined to repeat his former success. He remembered that his body couldn't keep up with his opponent's movements. In his thoughts, there was a desire to increase his sensitivity to the maximum to be able to read the movements of his opponent's joints necessary to strike. And after a second, Ark actually starts to feel something. That's when their battle begins with the bandage guy attempting a shoulder strike on Ark. Meanwhile, Mimimic is watching Ark's synchronization level with shock on his face. Pak Noah doesn't even think of backing down and is just thinking through his next steps in his head. With a confident look, he was getting closer to the guy with the bandage with each passing second. In one confident move, Ark strikes the masked guy in the face. The masked guy's thoughts are muddled. He can't shake the feeling that Ark is just predicting his attacks. It's like he can see the future because Ark doesn't think about his next move for a second. And as long as Mimic kept a close eye on the indicators, he never once noticed any signs of illegal programs being used. However, the synchronization level indicator was already a full 527%. The masked man couldn't believe it, because only recently, 400% was already beyond the realm of reality, and now Ark had even surpassed 500. And while these two were discussing what was happening in front of Ark, the defeated body of his opponent was already dissolving in the air, disappearing as if it never existed. With eyes full of hope, he turned toward Mimic and the masked man. As he approached them, he proudly proclaimed that he had proven that he had not used any illegal programs. The masked man apologized for his suspicions and informed Ark that he had an offer. But Ark refused and said that thanks to him, he realized that he had been special in the crossing world all along. With a haughty look, he continued that he didn't think he could lose to anyone right now. And straight into the masked man's face, he asked a question that didn't really require an answer, that he wouldn't mind if he took his expensive weapon. To which he simply laughed and noted that it was too early to deal with the killer's condition and offered to talk afterwards. After the words were spoken, Ark froze, his face expressing utter bewilderment and confusion. But his condition was interrupted by the masked man, who was already delivering a fatal blow to Ark's body. More questions arose in his mind. Why didn't he see anything? Wasn't his synchronization level high? Ark also thought about the items that would disappear after his end, and the masked man, as if reading his mind, said that if Ark wanted the items back, he could find a player with the nickname Hidden in the Bush. Along with the development of the virtual world intersection in reality, discoveries in science and technology have also been made, especially in robotics. Robots gradually replaced humans in various fields until they displaced them from the service industry. There are also personalized robots, like a robot protector, for a 10-year-old boy he named T1. Seeing the crying boy in front of him, the robot couldn't help but feel embarrassed. He had never seen this child show any emotion before. Even when he came home covered in abrasions and scratches, he remained indifferent. When this guy asked the robot what to do, the robot's reaction was delayed because it was the first time such a situation had happened. So the reaction he was able to show was anger that needed to go somewhere. And while showing his emotions for the first time, Park Noah cried and tried to find support in the robot. He in turn continued to be angry and only expressed his desire to straighten the guy out. So finally, in an empty room, the robot and Park Noah got together for a normal conversation. The room was tense, with the robot berating Park Noah for spending money at the internet cafe and losing his savings in Heroes of Time. He continued to berate Park Noah, to which the latter brushed it off, claiming it was for the sake of future investment. Having said that it was useless to talk to a gambler, the robot had no choice but to advise Park Noah to try to get back what he had lost the way he had been told to. While Park Noah doubted he could get it all back, the robot said that even if he had to beg on his knees, let him do it. But Park Noah had never asked anyone for such favors, and the robot was frustrated that despite his master's maturity, he couldn't even handle such simple things. However, he still promised to help him learn the skill of asking for favors. The day Park Noah decided to apologize was sunny and warm. The man hiding in the bushes turned out to be the masked man who right now Park Noah was begging for his items and gold back. Being in a very strange pose that was not clear to Hidden in the Bushes himself. Standing on his hands and already unable to bear the weight of his body, Park Noah said that this pose is called the Great Bow, and he's heard it's the best way to ask for something, or apologize to someone. After a second, however, Ark was happy to change his pose, because Hidden in the Bushes had just told Ark, in a calm voice, that he was going to give it all back. But it is worth noting that there are some conditions for this, and a projection immediately appeared in front of Hidden in the Bushes. Hidden in the Bushes was going to return things if Ark answered all the questions the man had. And a projection with the crossing contract appeared in front of Ark's face, confirming the seriousness of Hidden in the Bushes' intentions. The contract stated that if Ark lied when answering questions, all his items and savings would be lost. Having once again scrutinized the presented contract, Ark comes to the conclusion that on the whole, according to its contents, everything is not so bad for him. Then he offers the Hidden in the Bushes to ask Ark questions on the same terms, and the man agrees, because surely Ark has a lot of questions too. And in a second, all of his previously lost items and accumulated funds appear in Ark's inventory. A smile immediately spreads across his face. He looks incredibly happy, and joy clearly overwhelms him. But he has to focus on the already asked question of whether he is really a middle school student. Ark mentally decided to give vague answers to questions because it shouldn't be considered a lie, so his answer was no. As soon as those words came out of his lips, everything he had just regained was immediately lost again, all of his resources scattered to the sides. Sweat dripping down his face. He's really worried because he thought he was smart enough to take into account all the nuances of the contract. To which Hidden in the Bushes only said that Crossing is a virtual reality game that can read the minds of any of the players. Even if he was going to lie, Ark would only make an idiot of himself. In the same second, Ark confirmed like a sweetheart that he was a middle school student. After which, with the same malleable look, he asked if he could have his things back again. Without answering his question, hidden in the bushes reminded him that it was Ark's turn to ask his question. Park Noah was already looking downcast and decided to find out why he was doing this to him. In response, hidden in the bushes said he wanted to invite Ark to his gaming team and offered to treat it as an interview, at which point Ark's face changed. Forgetting the rules, Ark tries to ask the next question, but the hidden in the bushes interrupts him, asking what career the schoolboy wants to pursue. Almost dressed, Ark says he will choose the one that will give him as much money as possible and immediately asks his question. What team we're talking about? Hidden in the bushes answers that it's a team from a league playing at the Fantastic Academy. And just seconds after his answer, hidden in the bushes announces his next question about whether Ark likes to play. Sensing some kind of trick from the lightness of the questions, Ark still answers that he likes it. At the same time, not even thinking to stop thinking about the Fantastic Academy, because the question that he cares so and twists in his head is whether he can get there. Covering his mouth with his hand, he realizes he said it out loud, whereupon hidden in the bushes immediately says that Ark can go there as long as he believes it. Next, hidden in the bushes asks Ark what if he fights an opponent stronger than him and realizes that his loss is inevitable. Does he dare to go against his opponent? Ark replies with a proud and confident look, without hesitating for a second, that of course, yes. And in the same second, the image of his main enemy, Hyunjun, pops up in his mind. Ark immediately flinches. He doesn't understand why this man out of nowhere has appeared in his thoughts. He knows that the answer to hidden in the bushes question is yes, but why is Ark haunted by the feeling that he's lying? Pressing his lips together, he still doubts the correctness of his answer and is silent for a bit. Gathering his thoughts, he quietly answered in the negative and stared at the floor without lifting his gaze. Continuing that he doesn't want to get involved in such a battle because it makes no sense, and even trying would be pathetic. Ark wouldn't want to be in that situation. But if this battle turns out not to be his last, he can overcome himself and become a better man. He is interrupted by the hidden in the bushes, saying that every year at Fantastic Academy, there is a competition among the students. Faculty-led teams are focused solely on winning to become representatives of the academy. Many of them fight desperately for their position, but are defeated and give up their aspirations. Unfortunately, only a few endure the struggle and continue to move forward. Some people's dreams come true and some don't, because this is a place where only one person can become the most valuable player. Saying these words, hidden in the bushes points his blade towards Ark, putting a gleaming blade to his throat. Hidden in the bushes asks if Ark has the courage to survive in such a place. Park Noah thought about it again, saying to himself that he didn't like to lose, and remembering how he had attacked Hyunjun in the fight and was sure he would win. But unlike the virtual world in reality, their capabilities are completely different, because for one reason, only his gang did not resist, and if you do not enter the battlefield from the beginning, you can avoid the fate of the loser. So, what should Ark do if he encounters a monster he can't handle? How he should act in such a situation? The answer for Pot Noah was obvious, and he knew it from the beginning. Resolutely grabbing the blade with a trembling hand, Ark said it was his turn to ask a question. Doesn't hidden in the bush need someone to be an assassin on his team? Looking into Ark's eyes, hidden in the bushes was silent for a moment, as if pondering whether or not to respond to this. After a little while, he does reply that he really needs this player. Hidden in the bushes goes on to say that Ark lacks some important skills anyway, and even though he's highly synchronized, he has a lot to learn. Hidden in the bushes was only able to give Ark one piece of advice that he would need to pass the test by his own efforts in the admittance process. Now Ark would face an entrance test in 3 months, and hidden in the bushes, looking straight into Ark's eyes, asked his final question if he was ready to undergo the arduous training. Ark's happiness was unbounded. He felt a smile spread across his face and a lightness in his chest, and then he confidently gave his consent. So his training started the next day, and arriving there, he wasn't particularly enthusiastic. The pink-haired girl standing in front of Ark swore to him that she was here at the request of Hidden in the Bushes. While Pa Noah asked who she was, the pink-haired girl stated the fact of Ark's arrival with a smile. And to confirm her hunch, she clarified whether Ark was another one of those recommended by the professor. Hearing this, Ark wondered if anyone else had been recommended besides himself. While Ark was still reeling from her earlier words, the pink-haired girl noted without the slightest surprise that Ark didn't seem to know anything about it, and anyway, it wasn't a big deal. In a moment, she was already in the air, swiftly pointing her foot toward Ark's face. With a quick and precise movement, she delivered one clear blow without giving Ark time to react. She then expertly bounced to the side, and with a sharp break, her foot raised a cloud of dust behind her. Ark was immediately angry as he didn't expect the girl to attack him so quickly, much less so suddenly. A little indignant, Ark didn't have time to react in time to feel the blow that came straight to his face again. This was followed by another hard blow to the stomach that caused him to crouch. Ark felt a sharp pain that pierced his stomach, and for a moment he lost the ability to breathe. His chest seemed to contract. With the words that she had already heard about Ark's highest level of synchronization, the pink-haired girl offered to fight him. Barely standing on his feet, Pak Noah struggled to comprehend the meaning of the offer he had received. Looking at him, the girl concluded that Ark didn't seem to feel much pain. Probably he was somehow dulling the pain sensations. Asked what Ark's sensitivity percentage was, his answer didn't take long to come out, and with a lungful of air, Ark shouted that he wouldn't even think of telling whoever had attacked him. But the girl did not back down, and with an even more menacing look, she repeated again the question she had already asked. Assuming it could be connected to the academy, Ark said his synchronization level is 1%. The girl immediately began to resent the fact that everyone was working so hard to reduce the level of sensitivity to pain to at least 20%. She immediately assumed a threatening pose and said that if she damaged him 20 times, she might be able to make Ark feel the pain he needed. She also noted in passing that she didn't like him at all. And while Ark was trying to realize the last words the girl had said, her fist was already near Ark's face. He bounces to the side in time to avoid another attack. Turning to the girl, he expressed his bewilderment that she thought he would fall for such a trick again. Exhaling, he tried to focus and remember the same feeling he had last time. Meanwhile, the girl hesitated a bit, trying to realize what exactly Ark was up to. And just a second later, a powerful blow from Ark flies towards her with incredible force. In parallel to these events, data and a photo of Ark were displayed on the tablet. Held by Kim's assistant, he was surprised that the professor had paid Pak Noah a 3-month subscription to the game room just because he didn't have his own virtual simulator. Asking how everything went, Kim's assistant was illuminated by the bright smile of the professor, who said with admiration that the level of synchronization of Pak Noah was incredible, but he still had much to learn in other areas. Kim's assistant suggested that it would be hard for him to rely only on the level of synchronization, because more skills are needed for success. In response, the professor said that he had asked Carrie to fight him for that purpose. Immediately, Kim's assistant got nervous because he knew that Carrie was quite good at her skills and could do a lot of damage to Pak Noah. The professor replied that there is no need to hurry, everything will show time, but Ark still has a serious training because there is no telling how strong monsters can meet ahead. And at this point, he tapped into the intersection in which he was known as hidden in the bushes. He found himself next to Ark and Carrie as Carrie restrained Ark using his arms and legs. Watching what was going on, the professor wondered if the expectations he had placed on Ark were too high. Turning to the professor, Ark asked for help because he could no longer control the radish-browed girl. She responded by shouting indignantly. From the absurdity of the situation, the professor tried to cover his eyes with his hand, not to see what was happening. After a while, when the professor managed to separate them, he decided to introduce them to each other with their consent. The professor pointed to Ark and introduced him, explaining that he was a dealer and had been selected as a candidate for enrollment, so he would soon begin training. He then introduced Carrie, who is also a dealer, and unlike Ark, she was already enrolled in the group, but a full 6 months after being selected as a candidate. Once enrolled, they will both be working on the same team, so now is a good time to find common ground. Looking at Ark and Carrie, the professor was already guessing how this might end. Carrie stood up and said that she had already fought Ark and asked if she could start training now. But the professor, without giving an answer to her question, decided to clarify how her and Ark's duel had gone. With genuine disgust on her face, Carrie said she felt as unpleasant as possible. This angered Ark because he felt that Carrie was showing a lack of respect for his efforts. So Ark had a question, which he didn't hesitate to ask if everyone else was like Carrie. The professor replied that he had chosen just the two of them and no one else. Ark immediately realized what expectations were placed on him, and under the flow of his thoughts, he heard the professor inquiring about his impressions after the duel with the other candidate. Immediately starting to answer, Ark anxiously shared that in his opinion, to become a pro gamer, one synchronization will not be enough. Also recalling the recent fight, he noted that Carrie moved instinctively as if she had been practicing constantly, and she was much stronger than her previous opponent, so he had a hard time dealing with her. And frankly speaking, after using his synchronization, he is as tired as a lemon. After this story, the professor praised Ark, for he had been right on all counts. Speaking of synchronization without realizing it, Ark was using all of it, and when he reached his limit, he temporarily burned out. In this state, it's impossible to activate synchronization to enhance senses, and that's why the professor was able to injure Ark last time. To be a good player in a virtual game, synchronization alone is not enough. You need to develop combat skills for the game and meditation for mental training. Professionals are constantly learning new things without putting them off. The professor asked Carrie to fight him so that Ark would understand. Then Ark noticed that since Carrie had been in the group for 6 months, she had been training for the same amount of time, and the professor confirmed his guess. With a sly smile and confidence in his words, Ark kept saying he'd catch up with Carrie in the 3 months before his test. The professor replied that it was impossible, and that he didn't even expect Ark to be able to reach Carrie's level before the test. Arch's trump card is synchronization, and Carrie's is fighting skills that help you win. She was born with a talent for martial arts that manifested itself in her ability to quickly learn techniques and strategies. Besides, as a recommended student by the admissions committee, she spends all day in the game. It's better to say that Ark will catch up to her by the time she gets in. Ark is also a candidate, so the professor will be able to arrange with the school for him to focus only on training. His face was instantly happy because he realized that he could not go to school if he didn't want to, and he would no longer have to suffer Hyun-jun and his unpleasant company. However, when he thought about it, the smile that had been on his face abruptly disappeared as if under the weight of sudden thoughts. And after a second, he sadly informs the professor that he still has some work to do, so Ark thinks he should concentrate on training after he's done with his tasks. The professor replies that Ark can do as he sees fit, and, if he wishes, say goodbye to his friends and the like. A little later, one sunny and clear day when the sun was brightly illuminating the schoolyard. School life seemed familiar and went on as usual. The teacher took roll call as usual. And when it was Pak Noah's turn, it was discovered that he was absent from class. Meanwhile, Hyun-jun was sitting in the classroom, his face reflected boredom, and he stared ahead without interest. And as the sun began to dip below the horizon and the sky turned warm colors, middle school students would pack up and head home, filling the streets with noise and bustle. And Hyun-jun was no exception as he headed home down the street. He put the headphones in his ears and turned on the energetic music, immersing himself in its rhythm. At the same time, he was thinking about the fact that Pa Noah had finally surrendered his joy. On top of that, he was a loser with no special talents and rich parents. If he hadn't gotten in Hyun-jun's way, he wouldn't have gotten that eternal beating from him. Hyun-jun's mood had lifted so much during the time he didn't see Pak Noah in front of his eyes. To make Hyun-jun feel better, Pak Noah couldn't have left school sooner. And while he was pondering all this, Hyun-jun's gaze involuntarily drifted forward. Taking off his headphones, Hyun-jun looked around once more, and noticing the man standing in front of him, he wondered who it could be. In response, the guy in the red sweatshirt addressed Hyun-jun by name directly and without any emotion. With that being said, isn't Hyun-jun interested in finding out who this Ark is, who recently dealt with him? Immediately, he assumed a threatening posture. He froze in place and his hands were tense, as if ready for any continuation of events. The guy went on to state with firmness and confidence in his words that perhaps he was Ark. Without delay, he offers Hyun-jun a reality fight right here and now. In fact, the glasses that Pa Noah wears are not diopters and are not meant to correct vision. There is only one use for them. They serve as material to build his character. Wearing glasses, he hides his real personality and portrays a cold and shy character, thus completing the creation of a character for the school. That's how he transfers all his problems and failures to Pak Noah, but when he puts on Ark's mask, he finds the opportunity to be his true self in the virtual world. And through this method, Pak Noah allows herself to move on in this challenging and cruel world. He realizes that misfortune is inevitable no matter how much he fights. He will not fail if he does not go out to fight, Pak Noah thought, remembering his words that only the foolish get into a fight they cannot win. The conflict continues, and in a moment of tense pause, Pa Noah makes no secret of admitting that he is actually Ark. Hyunjun's gaze expressed misunderstanding and shock because he hadn't expected the offer to fight in his moment of vulnerability. And already out loud, Hyunjun began to resent how Park Noah standing across from him could be Ark. Hyunjun moved toward Park Noah in bewilderment, not believing that he had been Ark all along. Hovering over Park, Noah Hyunjun looked at him with a threatening look and asked what now. Does Ark want Hyunjun to teach him a lesson? And with those words, Hyunjun gives Park Noah one powerful punch on the arm. Park Noah reassured himself that there was nothing to be afraid of because he was waiting for the moment when Hyunjun would be without his company, and he hoped that this fight would be like a game because it would be easier for him to cope. After a second, he made the decision to provoke Hyunjun to shake his mental state. With a crazy look, he was saying that Hyunjun was really bad at acting. That's the last thing that today's teenagers want to hear. As Park Noah expected, Hyunjun's face immediately changed. It was obvious that the ruse had worked. And Hyunjun immediately started shouting out that Park Noah would regret the words he just said. In turn, an image of a YouTuber talking about fighting on his blog popped up in Ark's mind. According to this blogger, the first attack of an overexcited man is a right-hand punch. However, Hyunjun gives Ark a punch to the stomach in the next second. Then Park Noah is immediately disappointed in the words of this blogger, realizing that his words are contrary to reality. Hyunjun continues to attack and can't believe that Park Noah dares to think that if Hyunjun is alone, he can defeat him. Once again, relying on his confidence, Hyunjun throws another punch that is blocked by Park Noah. Park Noah's teeth gritted with anger, his patience running out, and he felt a growing rage overwhelming him. And he immediately goes on the offensive with a series of what he thought were very strong blows. But Hyunjun's sensation was different. The blows he received were like baby slaps. Park Noah's thoughts were preoccupied with the fact that in the simulation, he fought very differently in reality, but for some reason he could not concentrate and think about his actions during the fight. He followed it up with another strong and accurate blow that made him lose his balance. Yes, so much so that Ark flies off to the side, hitting the pavement and losing the ability to continue fighting for a few seconds. While he's immobilized, Hyunjun puts his knee on his ribcage, saying words to the effect that he fights as disgusting as he looks, swinging at Park Noah again and not giving him a chance to recover. Hyunjun's punch accurately hits his cheek, causing his head to turn sharply to the side. Hyunjun continued to attack him without realizing what was going on and assumed that Park Noah might have taken some kind of banned substance because suddenly he was acting like he had never acted before. If he had just surrendered, he would have been less injured. Hovering over Ark, Hyunjun again suggests that Ark thought that if Hyunjun was left alone, he could defeat him. Park Noah, even though he was already badly beaten up, said wryly that if an underachiever like Hyunjun was alone, he wouldn't be afraid. After that, Park Noah spat in Hyunjun's face with obvious contempt and disrespect. Hyunjun was instantly seized by anger, his eyes glittering with rage, and all his thoughts focused only on making his opponent suffer. So in Park Noah's face came a new blow even more painful than the last. And while the other streets seemed to be quiet and no footsteps or conversations could be heard, here at this location, 2 high school students were trying to resolve their conflict, and one had already disarmed the other. Hyunjun let Park Noah know not to get in his face again, or it could end up being much worse next time. As he left, Hyunjun glanced at Park Noah and said that he was nothing. When it seemed like it was already over behind Hyunjun's back, Ark suddenly asked where the goofy one was going. And so with his body trembling, Park Noah struggled to get to his feet. Screams, stating that he's never been able to really hit Hyunjun yet despite trying. He immediately rushed from the spot, using all the strength he had left at that moment. Hyunjun was determined and ready to put an end to this conflict once and for all, again directing his fist towards Park Noah. However, the latter's legs are jacked up, and he stumbles heavily. At this moment, when Park Noah was already falling, Hyunjun's hand only had to smash the air in front of her, and Park Noah's exhausted body rapidly continued to approach the ground. Of course, he hoped that he could continue the duel, but because of the severe injuries, his legs were already difficult to obey. Images began to pop up in his mind, and he remembered the professor's question about whether he could fight the enemy even if he was sure of his defeat. Park Noah couldn't believe that he wouldn't be able to answer it. Of course, this is the first time he's fought against Hyunjun with such strength. He's already done a good job, and he's really amazing because he still hasn't been defeated even after all the beatings he's received. But will it really end with Park Noah just going up against Hyunjun? What will change after facing an opponent he can't stand up to? Could this be the answer the professor was expecting, and which does correspond to the truth? Even if that's the case, Park Noah doesn't care anymore, so right now he just wants to lie down and rest. Leaning on his leg, Ark remembers how in the game he reached out to the professor, feeling that every moment could be decisive. Park Noah subsequently encompassed the blade of the knife with his outstretched hand and asked the professor if Ark himself was not the one he needed, the one who would become the ace, and why Ark said something after which incredible expectations were placed on him. For now, because of the words Ark had said on emotion then, it was a turning point for him. Directing his fist clearly into Hyunjun's face, Park Noah realizes that now he can't even fall down when he wants to. And with the same determination, his fist keeps coming closer and closer, until Ark finally delivers that hard, cherished blow. The recoil was so strong that Hyunjun immediately flew off to the side before he even realized what had happened. And Park Noah continued to stand in the posture from which he had made this attack. Then his eyes widened for a second, as if he realized what had just happened. Under the effects of adrenaline, he didn't immediately realize his actions and instinctively began to cover his face, trying to defend himself. When he came to his senses, he saw Hyunjun's motionless body on the floor in front of him. Sweat was running down his face, and he couldn't remember what had happened before. Turning to Hyunjun, Park Noah suggested that he was faking, and if he continued to lie like that, Park Noah would think he had won. With an equally bewildered look on his face, Park Noah seems to have begun to realize his winnings. In the next instant, his eyes immediately filled with tears of happiness. Because of the emotions that suddenly overwhelmed his whole being, he couldn't help himself and screamed, letting out all the stress and joy that had accumulated inside. It was the first time in his 15 years that Park Noah had ever cried out. After a while, the front door of the apartment opened and Streetlight entered the room. It was Park Noah who came home and immediately greeted the robot standing with his back to him. T1 pointed out that Park Noah had previously said that he didn't need to go to school and that he thought he could rest at home because that's how young people recuperate. To which Park Noah quipped that T1 had learned to grumble again from watching TV. The robot, as if not paying attention, added that you should at least rinse your hands after coming in from the street, and pointedly turned away and said that maybe someday Park Noah would correct his habits, but immediately turned around sharply towards Park Noah with the most alarmed look possible. He shouted and asked what happened to Park Noah's face. T1 asked how you have to fall down the stairs to make your face like that. Park Noah replied not to worry too much, and despite the robot's worries, he began to laugh heartily. For despite his injuries, he had also retaliated by pounding that very staircase. Meanwhile, in the world of Heroes of Time, in a beautiful-looking inn in a certain village, sitting in the bushes without a mask, expressed his surprise as the opponent sitting across from him finished his task faster than he thought. Speaking of which, he thought it would take about a week. He watched Ark's satisfied face in front of him as he excitedly said that the sooner he started training, the better. And when the professor asked if Ark had said goodbye to his friends, he said that of course he had done everything perfectly. To begin with, then, the professor decided to proceed with the story about the test for admission to the academy on recommendation, which is Ark's goal. The Fantastic Academy has 10 professors who control the game teams. In the process, competitions are held to recruit from 5 to several dozen participants to each team. Competitions were held continuously, but the lack of restrictions on the number of players and teams led to some participants being excluded, which created teams with a lack of players, and the academy developed countermeasures. And those countermeasures are exactly what people like Ark are doing by recommendation. The other professors look for talented people from the outside, which in turn, the academy allows them to recommend 2 people each year, and the recommendation test checks their abilities and is conducted in order to exclude unfair admissions. Without getting enough points in the test, Ark, like everyone else, will not be able to enter the academy. However, the professor immediately, as if reassuring him, said that Ark had nothing to worry about at all. After all, he only needs all the basics beyond the synchronization level, and over the next 3 months, he will fill in all the gaps in his skills. After that, the professor identified 4 key sessions that became the basis of the program. The first was the professor's lecture. Once a day, Ark listened to the professor's lectures and accumulated missing knowledge about virtual reality, such as information about the level of synchronization of the theory of combat player's position, and so on. The second is the hardening of physical strength in real life, because according to the professor in the virtual world, you play with your physical body. The third activity was investing time in hunting in Heroes of Time and increasing levels there. The professor also mentioned that it is important to get used to the academy's schedule in virtual reality, where you have to spend 10 hours every day. And last is the daily 2-hour fistfights at the stadium with Carrie, in which the use of synchronization boosting was banned. During these fights, Carrie noticed that Ark's sensitivity level had increased a bit, and now it was more interesting to hit him. This sent Ark into a storm of anger and rage that he could barely contain, because Ark was sure that in this period of time, he would not be able to defeat her, since his current state left much to be desired. Because in order to fight someone like Carrie, Ark also needed some other weapon besides his level of synchronization. And even if he can't win yet, it doesn't have to be tolerated. After all, what he learned from his fight with Hyunjun is that if you don't give up, there is a way. So he continued his preparatory training with even greater diligence. Very quickly, the 3 months flew by, and the day of the academy admission test came. Ark was busy preparing things that might come in handy later. Of course, not without the help of the T1 robot, because he was just as worried as Ark at that moment. Again and again, checking things he might have forgotten, Ark worried that at this rate, he might miss his train. Running out of the apartment, T1 wished Ark good luck, and not to be confused at an inopportune moment. Whereupon the robot was left in the apartment, all alone, without any company. With the full realization of this, his expression changed. Come to think of it, it's been 5 years since T1 lived here. Over time, the kid T1 watched grow up had a dream of becoming a pro gamer. And despite the fact that after the disappearance of his parents, this child did nothing but cry, as time went on, he pulled himself together. T1 had been supporting him all along, so this day was no exception, and looking at the pictures of Pak Noah's missing parents, he mentally asked for their support. Meanwhile, Pak Noah had already arrived at the train station ready for the onward journey. Barely had time to run into Puck's wagon, Noah was panting heavily. Slightly nervously, he whispered that he barely had time to zace himself. Immediately, Ark began to look at the carriage, while a loudspeaker announced that this train was a top-class transport that would go from his city to the city of destination without stopping. After a certain amount of time, Ark became visibly nervous. To his train of thought, the train set off, starting its journey. He picked up speed quickly while tension built up inside Ark. Not considering the fact that there was a big task ahead, Ark's thoughts were also on the fact that he was traveling for the first time to a destination city that probably looked more like a city than the place he lived in. The professor even bought Ark such an expensive ticket. Park Noah wondered what the professor would do if he failed the test. Immediately, he banishes the bad thoughts and tells himself that he can handle everything because he is trained and prepared so well for this moment. However, he still hadn't beaten Carrie once. It pained him greatly. A bright glow suddenly distracted Pak Noah from his obsessive thoughts. His face lit up with the soft light of the setting sun, creating warmth and calmness in his heart. He continued to look at the scenery that opened up as the train moved. Pak Noah was overflowing with admiration and sincere joy. His face was glowing with happiness. For now, he felt he was really going there to the academy. Upon arrival in the city, the sunset remained just as bright, filling the sky with rich hues. As he exited the carriage, Pak Noah was called out by someone, and with a puzzled look, he tried to find the person whose voice had come from the crowd. It was a long-haired man with glasses, who beckoned Ark to come over to him. The man said hello to him and asked if he was Pak Noah. Realizing it was him, the man introduced himself as the guide sent by Professor Hidden in the bushes and asked to be called Assistant Kim. Taking a closer look at his opponent, Ark noticed that Kim's assistant was very active and looked quite friendly, whereupon his new acquaintance welcomed him to the town of A. Subsequently, they and Ark made their way to the academy-provided hotel, where Kim's assistant guided Pak Noah to a special room for the student on the recommendation of the distant visitor. Pak Noah was delighted and couldn't believe that he could receive such treatment. Kim's assistant also said that Pak Noah could also use all the services of the hotel unlimitedly. He added that Ark was even more naive in real life than he had been in Crossroads, and he was very pleased to see him. However, Ark couldn't understand if he had already seen him in Crossroads with Assistant Kim, to which Kim's assistant struck an intriguing pose and said that he was actually the one who recommended Pak Noah to the professor, whereupon he confessed that he is none other than popular streamer Planet Man in The Crossing. Ark looked toward Kim's assistant with eyes full of bewilderment. After that, Ark discreetly thanked Planet Man for the recommendation. Planet Man's mind was filled with emotions, and he didn't understand why Ark reacted so coldly. The answer was simple. Ark was only thinking about the battle with Hyunjin and didn't follow the broadcast at all. Park. Noah then asked the assistant professor if there was a place in this hotel from where he could enter the crossing. Despite Park Noah's zeal, virtual reality was forbidden here, and the professor also said that everyone should have a good rest today by staying in their rooms. Just then, Kim's assistant added that he actually had to go on a date right now and suggested that Ark pretend like they knew nothing about each other's actions on the condition that Ark tell the professor about the good observation on his part. Ark became incredibly happy and shouted that he would definitely subscribe to Planet Man. In response, Planet Man was surprised to hear that Ark had not yet been signed. So taking advantage of the situation, Pot Noah headed to the game room after removing Kim's assistant from the room. With eagerness and unwillingness to endure, he thought about whether he could finally see it. You can't go all the way to the city and not go there. It is said that the mirror world was created as an exact replica of the city, reflecting all its features and details. This is a local world that can only be accessed from City A. All the changes and constructions of City A are displayed in it in real time, and the use of avatars allows you to act faster than in reality, which gives a sense of superhero powers. It's also one of the most popular tourist destinations, and at this time, Ark was already launching Crossing, specifically Mirror World. A second later, he found himself in a mirror world. However, his surroundings remained unchanged, which made it completely feel like Ark was using an avatar in real life. Without wasting precious time, Ark immediately ran out of the building he was in. This world was full of bright colors, and the people in it created an atmosphere of liveliness and energy. The place was bustling with virtual life as the chefs took orders. People passing by on the streets were looking for partners for mini-games. This world radiated freedom and diversity, attracting everyone with its unique character. Ark's delight was unparalleled, and he was finally in his cherished mirror world right now. He dared to assume that the bulk of the inhabitants of City A spent most of their time here. Telling himself that there was no time to think, Ark set himself the goal of finding her sooner rather than later. Running down yet another cozy street with benches and beautiful buildings, Ark couldn't contain his delight. Happiness was written on his face as he finally found her. A majestic and incredibly beautiful statue of Faker, full of fine details that only exists in a mirror world. Faker is one of the best and most famous gamers who suddenly left his field and hid from everyone. But his name is still on people's lips as the best gamer who left countless achievements. The internet said that praying in front of this statue guarantees a smooth game. So Ark immediately began praying at the statue, asking for help in getting into the academy as a recommended student. After a short while, Ark heard Carrie's prayer coming from behind him. They turned to each other almost simultaneously and asked in surprise what you were doing here. Ark continued and asked Carrie if she had come to pray to the statue because she was as worried as he was. She immediately became indignant and asked Ark not to put them on the same level. She then asked if Ark had come to the VR room at the hotel, despite the fact that the professor was supposed to tell him to rest today. Ark said that it was a secret, so he couldn't tell her anything. Ark immediately realized that Carrie was an exchange student like him, and of course the professor should treat her the same way. Carrie replied that she was ace, so it was okay. Waving it off, Ark noted that he had just gotten here and still had a lot to see, so he was going to head over to the Fantastic Academy. Carrie asked why such a futile effort, since Ark couldn't get there, and Ark's face immediately changed. Ark decided to ask Carrie what she meant, and she grudgingly said again that his efforts were futile. He was in despair, because how come he wouldn't be able to get into the Fantasy Academy than what was going on in the last 3 months of his life? In the 3 months of training with Carrie, out of the 132 fights, Park Noah had not won a single victory, not a single draw, and all 132 fights he had lost, he had never once been able to defeat her. Not only was he unable to win, but he never once took damage. But despite his defeats, his desire to improve became stronger. He thought every day about how to defeat Carrie and searched for his technique. He always enjoyed the process, because Pot Noah considered Carrie a worthy opponent, the man he aspired to and had to defeat with his own strength. So the words Carrie had just said were a blow to him. He couldn't understand why she had said it. After all, he was sure that he would not lose. Always Pot Noah knew that in time his efforts would bring results. To which Carrie got into a fighting stance and offered to fight him right here and now. It was obvious from the look on Ark's face that he was ready to accept the challenge. Carrie's face also expressed a sea of emotion. She was looking forward to what was about to happen. In a second, Ark and Carrie were rushing towards each other, ready to start the battle. And in the same second, a sudden energized red glow appeared. After the glow dissipated, Carrie noticed Ark standing right next to her. Carrie didn't realize what had just happened when she heard Ark tell her to take it. Pointing his fist in her direction, he said that he too would pass tomorrow's test and would definitely get into the academy. So let her take back what she just said. As if she didn't understand what was going on, she expressed her bewilderment, saying that she didn't know what he was talking about and why he was yelling about such an obvious topic. While Ark's thoughts were confused, she abruptly threw him onto the sag, saying that that was where she needed to pick up. Through the pain, Ark said that she had just claimed that he couldn't get into the academy. Carrie replied that it was true, and Ark went on to say that now she was saying it again. Carrie exclaimed, "How can he get into the academy if entry for people from the outside is forbidden? The mirror world has no incarnation for such people, and they can't even see her from the outside." Ark's face immediately showed despair, and tears appeared in his eyes, and on top of that, Carrie was surprised that Ark didn't even know it. Getting up from the floor, Ark continued to be indignant because Carrie didn't even bother to tell him that he wouldn't be able to get into the academy. But Carrie replied that Ark seemed to have a very strong persecution mania since he understood her words exactly like that. And why would she say that? Now that Ark is on her team, his success depends on her, so she should support him. And on the contrary, let him remember if he fails tomorrow's exam, Carrie will be sure to teach him a lesson. At these words, Ark was so moved that tears immediately flowed down his cheeks, and he did not hide his emotions and continued crying right in front of her. Carrie couldn't stand the weakness and shouted at Ark to stay away from her with his tears. After stretching and getting a little away from the events, Carrie realized she was hungry, and knowing that Ark was in the same VR room of the hotel as she was, she offered to eat together, to which Ark agreed. After her words, it was as if he was shaking off the previous events and started trying to understand what Carrie had just said. Coming to his senses, Ark realized that she had offered to let him eat together, which meant that he will meet Carrie in real life, and consumed by these thoughts, he notices a girl approaching him. Thinking back to the past, when they continued to fight Carrie in Heroes of Time Arc, something interested me. What she actually looked like in reality, he only knew that her abilities were outstanding despite being the same age. He also knew she had incredible punching power. After getting beaten up by her for 3 months, Ark gathered information from which he formed his idea of Carrie in reality. This collective image was, to put it mildly, not a pleasant experience. But why was it that when Ark finally saw her, he felt a strange, almost inexplicable feeling? After all, a smiling girl with short hair approached him and asked if he was Ark. The appearance was a stark contrast to what he had expected. Seeing Ark shaking, she confirmed that she was indeed Carrie and in real life wasn't going to hit him. She added that in real life, they couldn't call each other by nickname and suggested that Ark introduce himself. Deciding to start first, she said her name was Li Xia. Ark, still with a frightened expression on his face, nervously said his name, Pak Noah. And Li Xia immediately reached out her hand with a smile and said that she was counting on Pak Noah. So, as planned, they went out to eat, picking out some delicious food that they definitely deserved after all that was behind them. Li Xia looked very happy at this moment. After all, she was happy to have such a delicious meal. At that moment, Ark thought to himself that it was just ramen and kimbap, and she was so happy. As his thoughts were interrupted by Li Xia, she asked where Park Noah was from, and he said that he was from A City. She in turn said that she was from F Town, which is very close to Pakanoa Town, and this shocked him. Then he remembered that the city of F was what they call the #1 crime rate underworld, and realized that Carrie lived in the city with the lowest level of public order. Carrie noted that it was even possible to eat in the city, and that it was a great place to live. Park Noah heard this and concluded that it was not even possible to eat in the city of F. He couldn't understand how she had been able to live there all this time. Pointing her wands towards Puck, Noah Li Xia began to say that a little earlier. He has excelled in training in the use of synchronization, hasn't he? Park Noah confirmed her assumptions and said that he didn't want to keep losing, and Li Xia said that he was more determined than she expected, and it would be more interesting to fight him. Park Noah then decided to ask her how she became a recommendation student, to which Li Xia replied that the professor recruited her after their battle. More specifically, it happened in Heroes of Time. They first met him in the Heroes of Time arena. He didn't look like an academy professor at all then, and his actions were such that Carrie could barely breathe, as if he were calculating her movements and abilities, attacking with incredible precision. She tried several times, but she couldn't beat him. That got Pak Noah thinking, because if Carrie's sure she can't beat him, then how strong is the professor? Then Lee Shia asked if Park Noah thinks so too, because it would be strange if the professor became famous with such powers. But even if you search for his hidden in the bushes ID, no information appears. At that moment, the two hadn't met him in real life, although they would have liked to see his face, but it looked like they would have to wait until tomorrow. Lee Shia added that Park Noah hadn't seen the professor in real life either. The professor recommends them to the academy, which is attended only by the elite who come from good families, so the question arises as to who this professor really is. However, despite their strong desire to find out as soon as possible, it is likely that they will not receive this information until tomorrow. The very next day, you could see on the professor's face that he was visibly nervous. He sat at a table in the packed hall, surrounded by the others who took their seats. The professor couldn't believe that the entire faculty was gathered at such a late hour. The headmaster said that he would reveal the content of tomorrow's exam today, and the professor couldn't understand why he was doing it so early the day before it was to be held. It seems the principal is up to something again. What kind of exam he's prepared this time? The other professor in the room turned to Professor Lee, which caught him off guard. The blonde man continued by asking if Professor Lee had found intelligent students to recommend this time. The man was a professor from the academy. His name was Bison. So Professor Lee turned to Professor Bison and said that, judging by the fact that he was asking such a question, he too had found someone capable. In response, Professor Bison laughed with certainty that he had found an incredible genius. He was sure that his student would be the best among the recommended ones, but Professor Lee replied that his guys were not so easy either. While they were discussing, a man intervened, saying that their students were still homeless children from the slums. It was a professor from the academy named Seiler, a long-haired, statuesque man. Professor Seiler went on to say that Professor Lee brings in poor people every year who don't realize where they're going and cause chaos in the academy. Professor Lee responded by noting that it is said that standing water spoils over time, and he believes that personality can manifest itself in any environment, so these children will be the pioneers who created a generation. After interrupting him, Professor Bison agreed with him and said that this time he had found someone from the city of F. These words did not make any impression on Professor Seiler. He only thought about how a man with no experience and an unclear past could become a professor and now ruin the whole academy. How did the headmaster find him in the first place? Their thoughts and conversations were interrupted by the sound of the door opening as they entered. A long-haired man with his hair tied back in a ponytail who said with affirmation that everyone was all in. This mature man was the director, who seemed quite friendly and later apologized for his lateness. He also thanked everyone for adjusting to the pace of an old man like him because he had an interesting idea. In response, Professor Seiler began to flatter the director by saying how hard he was trying, and the principal began to reveal the contents of the exam with full confidence that everyone in the room would enjoy it. In test mode, we'll launch the game Battle Royale, where recommended students will start with basic equipment, will collect items and abilities to fight among themselves, and the winner of all participants will be the final winner. The bald man immediately asked if this meant that the game would only be played by one person. The director replied that he would not create a game with such a balance, and explained that participants would earn points on survivability, KDA, and game content. There is also something that the professors will have to do for this test, because they should have prepared the training videos that the principal asked them for in advance. And now, based on these videos and student recommendation portfolios, they're going to rank these 20 people. D ranks 7 people, C 5 people, C 4 people, A 3 people. And continuing with an already more insidious look, the director said that there would be one S-ranked person. The only person selected by the S rank will get a special benefit in this exam. Continuing on, the headmaster asked if everyone was curious how the students would react to the ranks given to them by the academy. Then Professor Lee only confirmed that the headmaster was an unpredictable person. And speaking of the fact that the time was already late, the director, with a smile on his face, suggested to start sooner rather than later. Meanwhile, it had gotten quite dark in the city, and while the full moon was in the sky, it illuminated the night city. Pak Noah arrived at his room and lay on the bed thinking about the recent events. He couldn't understand where Carrie had come from to be so friendly. He also hoped she hadn't noticed his lack of experience with people in real life, except for the T1 robot. With thoughts of whether or not she was at all worried before tomorrow, Pak Noah stared out the window. Tomorrow is the entrance exam for recommended students to enter the academy. If Pak Noah flies out, the past 3 months will be useless. Just thinking about it, Puck Noah was immediately covered in cold sweat and his entire body shuddered. At this time in the hall, the director kept talking about the fact that they had divided all the participants into CD through S ranks. And by unanimous decision of the faculty, they give this student an S rank. With a smile, he asked those seated in front if anyone had any objections. At this time, Professor Lee was pondering the fact that there were real monsters with absurdly high levels in the exam this time, so he hopes his students are successful in their endeavor. Professor Lee thought about it while looking at Puck Noah's portfolio that was right in front of his face. The next morning, the corridor leading to the personalized game rooms for each participant was empty, and in one such room was a sleepy and nervous Puck Noah, who was already sitting in a chair and was delighted that he had indeed come to Fantastic Academy. And holding the book in his hands, he thought that on his arrival, he was immediately escorted to this place, however. After being told to read this book before the exam, a full hour had passed. Yesterday, Puck Noah couldn't sleep because of the excitement and didn't meet with the professor, although he hoped that he would give him some tips on how to relieve the tension. Once again, Puck Noah began to be plagued by thoughts that he might just fail, and that's it. Slapping himself in the face with his fist, he tried to bring himself to his senses. After all, he had decided yesterday that passing the exam was good, but this particular one was of much greater importance. Remembering all the past 132 fights with Carrie and their outcomes, Puck Noah was determined to get the best score in this exam, and by all means, he would take first place. Turning to Carrie, he said he could use the synchronization level and would fight as hard as he could, but his words were interrupted by an announcement on the loudspeaker reminding the students of the academy to be careful. As the exam was about to begin and the students were asked to enter the crossing world inside the academy, Ark immediately felt a rising tension as he realized that everything was beginning. Then his gaze settled on the helmet lying next to him. After all, Ark does not intend to lose. He can win and please not only himself, but also those who counted on him. Opening his eyes after putting on his helmet, his gaze reflected light and silhouettes of many human figures appeared in front of him. The hall he found himself in was huge and filled with people. It was the royal palace, majestic and beautiful. It seemed to be the place where the exam was to be held. The people waiting for him to start surrounded Ark and looked very different. Some were differentiated by eye color, some by height, some by hairstyle. One way or another, they were all united by the fact that everyone here had come here by recommendation. And while Ark was familiarizing himself with his surroundings, Carrie came up behind him. He immediately began to think that up until now, all he had done was lose to Carrie, but that would end tonight. With his back turned to Carrie, Ark thought about how today was going to change things dramatically. Carrie's face immediately twisted in an incomprehensible expression in a way she couldn't understand. How dare Ark ignore her, and with those words she attacked him. Then their struggle was interrupted by a sharp coughing sound from directly ahead of them. It was the man sitting on the throne who announced that all 20 people were now here, and this time the disciples by recommendation were directly overflowing with energy. After introducing himself as the principal of this academy, he said his name was Jimmy Fullhouse, and he was very pleased to meet all the recommended students. All of them have been tracked down by the professors, and here they will check if the students have the right abilities. So the director hopes everyone has read the rulebook carefully and understood its contents. Starting to explain the essence of the exam, the principal said that it was a fantasy battle royal. All the students would be able to become stronger by farming items and leveling up, and the last surviving participant would be the one who passed the exam. As it was written in the rulebook, passing the exam requires not only surviving, but also proving your skills, so, of course, the last participant will get the most benefit. Then a red-haired guy approached the principal and said he had a question. He found something unusual in the rulebook and immediately asked what rank was, to which the principal replied that it was a good question because it was one of the main factors in this exam. Another topic of the exam is the rank capture war. Participants will start the game divided into groups from D rank to A rank, and if the opponent who will be higher in rank will be defeated by one of the participants, they will be able to get his rank. So the basis of this system becomes the survival of the highest of the ranks. However, they will not be able to recognize their rank from the beginning. The ranks assigned to them will be revealed in the first log of defeated Battle Royale players. There is another funny thing among the students. There is one person with S rank, so the Academy's treatment of them will depend on their rank, so the principal and professors promise better treatment for a person of S rank. At this point, Ark was wary, but also realized that S rank sounded very cool. The girl with the ears interrupted Ark's thoughts and decided to ask her question to the director. She asked what criteria were used to assign ranks, and if it could happen that a participant with S rank would be in a favorable position from the beginning. The director replied that he and the teaching staff had determined the ranks in advance by evaluating the skills on the video of the participants. To which the girl objected that how could they assign ranks just by consulting, because the criteria would not be accurate. The principal asked the girl with incomprehension if she meant to say she didn't understand the results of the assessment, and what she will do after that is walk off the stage, leaving all questions unanswered and abandoning her precious place here. They are in the Fantastic Academy, which is the best educational body in raising the greatest pro gamers. If those standing in the audience want to become professional gamers, they must realize that there are no objective criteria in the audience's evaluations, and a professional is someone who responds to the audience's accusations while being in the midst of them. It is this difference between the two that becomes the star indicator, after which the director told the girl to turn around. Her shock was unparalleled, but she still turned around as the principal had requested. Behind her stood the other 19 participants with intimidating-looking expressions on their faces, so she could see the difference between those who would become stars and those who wouldn't. Along with this event, Ark kept thinking he could be an S-ranked player and was still motivating himself, hoping he would take first place. And if she's not happy about something, she can prove it with her play, and if she has nothing else to say, you can start the exam right now. Their task is quite simple. They need to prove and show who they really are. They must prove with their play that they are worthy of becoming a student of Fantastic Academy. And the principal, in turn, promises to create the best environment to nurture their dreams. After the director's speech was over, the start of the game was announced, and the participants began to teleport to the venue, which was accompanied by a bright glow, leaving the headmaster and the men in black robes in silence in the castle hall. One of those standing dressed in a black robe was hidden in the bushes, who was cheering on Ark and Carrie with hope in his eyes. With the start of the exam, all students were asked to choose a starting location, and of course, Ark decided he would choose one back when he read the rule book. A little while later, the same bright laser released its beam among the spruce forest, teleporting Ark there and leaving him lying in an unknown location on the green grass. How noisy he appeared that it was immediately clear this was the Fantastic Academy exam. In any case, now was not the time to indulge in feelings. Ark had some things to do before he faced the game the professor was talking about, and the first was to decide and organize everything before the game started. In Battle Royale, initial farming is the key to victory. So Ark's main task is to find hidden boxes with valuable items as soon as possible. The map was divided into 10 zones. Opening each of them will become more and more dangerous. The problem is that the more dangerous territories become, the harder it will be to farm items at the end of the game. That's why by reading the rulebook, Ark found the best way to get the items he wanted in a short period of time. At this moment, he found an item like steel underpants. Its rarity level was normal, and its defense added +2. Ark didn't understand why something like that was in the box, and more importantly, how he was going to wear it. In a survival game, it's important to be careful and avoid encountering another participant at the beginning, because fighting or chasing can shorten the time to collect items and reduce the chances of winning. After analyzing the map, Ark came to the conclusion that the radius of the map is 10 kilometers and decided that the chances of meeting someone from the beginning are small. But as soon as he thought about it, he immediately felt someone's presence. Ark froze in the same pose he had been in before, unmoving as if transformed into a statue. The player next to him did exactly the same thing, so you'd think he was just mirroring Ark's actions. After a few seconds, Ark turns his head sharply toward his opponent, to which the man sitting next to him responds to Ark in the same way, and his gaze immediately drifts towards Ark. Ark's face instantly changes to an intimidating grimace when he sees the man in front of him who resembles a snowman. In turn, the expression on the face of the man who looks like a snowman also reflects incredible horror. 5 minutes after the start of the game, the first encounter took place between the number 11 exam player Ark and the number 7 player Genus. The two almost immediately ran into the wild forest among tall trees and thick bushes, while the professors watched them in the meantime. The professor immediately tensed up because Park Noah was really unlucky to run into another participant just 5 minutes after the game started. Professor Lee kept thinking that due to the lack of items the battle might drag on, and then a man standing nearby interrupted his thoughts and said that their students had clashed. It was Professor Bison who noted that the situation was getting very uncomfortable. Here at the academy, the principal believes that fun is an important component, and if they decide to avoid the battle and run away, it will definitely affect his grade, and if they stay and fight the start, will be disadvantageous for them. Still, the most rational choice was to avoid combat, and while the professors discussed the situation, Ark and Ginus stood up. And literally, at the same moment, they started moving towards each other, which made the professors assume that they had decided to fight. After which, Ark and Ginus literally walked past within centimeters of each other. As they moved apart, they seemed to be deliberately pretending not to see each other. Watching this, Professor Bison couldn't contain his laughter, because it was so inappropriate these two had survived, only because they were cowards. And at that moment, the principal's face sank. He didn't understand what was going on. In normal battle royal, there is always one rule, is the sudden death system. It exists to keep the game from dragging on. The more time passes, the more the danger zone expands, and the conditions for players become tougher. It is on this exam, starting from the 10th minute after the beginning, every 5 minutes, one dangerous area is added every 5 minutes. At this point in time, 25 minutes have passed, and out of 10 locations, there are 7 left. So far, there have been 0 fights, and the reason is that the content of the game is directly related to the exam grades for which the students remain too serious. But then this silence is broken by a sudden advance that interrupts the tense atmosphere. After all, Carrie got on the trail of the other examiner by finding an already open box in one of the precincts. Carrie speculated that the fact that there was no log of the defeated so far suggested that everyone was just hiding. She felt a sense of anticipation because the level of the competitors was supposed to be high, but were they really just cowards? Judging by the way the trail ended where Carrie was standing, her opponent must have gone ahead. Then she thought she should try to go out hunting, and she headed to a maze called the Abyss. Parallel to this, a man with blonde and long hair, revealed with a smile. The best item he had seen in the rulebook, he never thought he would get a legendary item that exists in each type, only in one copy. It was examiner number 19 Lucky Pancher, who delightedly said he had phenomenal luck. After all, in just 30 minutes from the start of the game, he had dressed head to toe in armor above unique, so that even in the entrance exam the man's luck did not fail him. While he was thinking that this could be considered his victory in the game, suddenly Carrie's voice came from behind him, saying that they had finally met, and also noted how deep Lucky Puncher hid afterward with an enthusiastic offer to fight him. He didn't show any reaction because he was full of confidence and just wanted to test his new weapon. Carrie asked if she should introduce herself, and without waiting for an answer, she rushed toward him in one swift movement. Their blades instantly met in a hard clash, and their faces full of emotion were in close proximity to each other. Noting Carrie's appearance, Lucky Puncher said that from the looks of it, she hadn't finished farming, while he had already packed up all the right stuff. Carrie was only happy with this state of affairs, because it meant that if she defeated him, she would get all these valuable items. This left Lucky Pancher shocked. He already thought that she didn't realize the importance of the difference in equipment in the Battle Royale. Reflecting Carrie's next attack, he expressed his disappointment in her aloud. Luck and the card. Lucky Pancher, used to destroy the weapon, allowed him to break Carrie's blade. Leaving Carrie unarmed, he was pretty sure he was the first to beat his opponent in this game. With one swing, Lucky Pancher aimed his blade at Carrie, but she dodged the attack masterfully, noticing his intentions, and continued doing back somersaults until she was far enough away from her opponent. Her movements made Lucky Pancher incredibly tense, and he immediately felt a cold sweat cover him. He immediately looked at Carrie and assumed his opponent was doing acrobatics. After a moment, Carrie asked if the destruction of her weapon was due to the strength of Lucky Pancher's blade, to which he replied that she seemed to have only just realized it, since the difference in equipment determines combat power. Carrie kept a positive attitude and said that since Lucky Puncher's gun was so good, it would be hers now. Lucky Puncher felt a little uneasy and said that she didn't understand what he was saying because he was saying that she was going to lose. Objecting that he was the only one who thought so, Carrie dropped one of her hands to the floor. It's usually the disadvantageous situations that show skill in the super game, and immediately she named Lucky Puncher the Golden Goblin. This is a player who has no abilities but has a lot of good items. This really hurt Lucky Pancher, and he shouted at her to make her doubt her powers, because he had no idea how she was going to defeat him, even without a weapon. With a sharp tug, he called Carrie's rabbit ears aloud and urged her to surrender. However, having already done a somersault in the air, she was on top of him. After which, she firmly grabbed Lucky Puncher's throat with her hands. Her face was full of tension, and the strength in her hands was so palpable. In the next instant, she was able to literally throw Lucky Puncher into the wall opposite. He couldn't bear the pain, and a wild scream erupted from his throat, echoing throughout the labyrinth. Nevertheless, Carrie didn't back down. The adrenaline rushing through her veins gave her extra strength, and with even more vigor and determination, she lunged toward Lucky Puncher. She aimed her fist right at his face, but Lucky Puncher managed to dodge, and Carrie's hand just punched through the wall that was right behind him. What he saw shocked Lucky Puncher. He could not understand how he could make such a powerful blow with his bare hands. He immediately thought it was a scam, and maybe everyone started the game with different parameters. Laughing at his words, Carrie replied that he didn't seem to know much about how to use the avatar in Crossing. Here, his abilities from the real world are amplified several times over. And thanks to the platform's well-manifested physical engine, if you manage to channel the flow of its power, you can deliver a devastating blow using all the power of your body and directing it to the right point, even if you don't have a weapon. After the crushing blow, Lucky Puncher fell to his knees, thinking about how unlucky he was to encounter such a monster in his path, and yet he recognized himself as incredibly unlucky. The pain made the tears flow helplessly down his cheeks. He couldn't hold them back. Lucky Puncher suggested that Carrie is nothing more than an S-ranked player, only she immediately said she didn't know it herself. But it seems not long before she can figure it out, and guiding her foot toward Lucky Puncher's head. Just as Carrie's foot was about to touch his head, a screen projection appeared in the air, which made it clear that the first lethal result had just been committed, and now the ranks of the examiners would be revealed. Carrie was surprised at the announcement, for she had not yet had time to do anything, and while she was thinking about it, Lucky Puncher crawled away from her in relief, for it was this message that gave him a chance to continue the game. But he was glad too soon, because Carrie hadn't forgotten about him, and noticing his attempt to escape, she still struck the blow she'd planned. After defeating Lucky Puncher, Carrie couldn't understand how someone could beat her by beating another contestant before her. She wondered who it could be. Looking more closely at the projection, she opened her eyes wide, for on it, she saw that the man who first defeated the opponent was Ark. 10 minutes before these events at the incredibly hot location of Blazing Mountain, Ark stood panting with a tired and haggard look, as if every second of being in this hot place had forced him to exert an incredible amount of effort. He was practically armorless, with only a shield and sword in his hands, his appearance clearly showing that he had not been able to find all the items he could use. As he continued to breathe with difficulty, he reflected that he had never expected to meet such an opponent. He was incredibly strong. Ark's opponent was a guy with turquoise hair armed with 2 katanas. Going back some more to the moment when Ark had just stepped into the location of Blazing Mountain, which was about 10 minutes after the exam had started. Ark ran through the area, remembering that he had met another apprentice from the beginning, which was why he hadn't even been able to farm properly. Judging by the fact that you can quickly move from one location to another in about 5 minutes, Ark thought that the territories here are not small, and he assumed that he would not meet other examiners here. And at that moment, his gaze was immediately fixed on the chest in front of him. Walking closer and opening the chest, Ark took in all the items lying in it. It was a sword and shield, which Ark was happy with, because he had gotten a weapon with good balance. In addition, it was rare, and it had an ability called Golden River Shield, which allowed it to emit light from the shield after it was used, and the enemy who would attack Ark at that moment would enter a state of stasis. With such valuable items, Ark enthusiastically decided that now he could really start farming. He was ready to face any opponent and confront anyone. Carrie didn't count, of course. Continuing to move through the location, Ark's gaze stopped on something interesting. A guy with turquoise hair was lying on the floor in front of him, with his face down in the chest. Ark couldn't understand why this guy was stuck in the chest, because if he had been defeated, he should have appeared in the log of the defeated, but he still wasn't there. Ark's first option was that the guy had already been defeated, but didn't show up in the log, but that was unlikely according to the rules of the exam. The second option was a trap for the enemy, but Ark thought it was too stupid and rejected the idea. So there was only a third option. If something had actually happened to this guy's body, we had to report it to the academy immediately. After Ark touched the turquoise-haired guy on the shoulder, he immediately stood up, causing Ark to lose his balance and fall. After that, the guy with turquoise hair looked towards Ark as if nothing had just happened. This only added more questions to Ark's mind. Then this guy leaned over the chest again and said he'd sleep for another 5 minutes. Ark turned to the guy and said that he had just said he would sleep for another 5 minutes, so he was just sleeping. The man looked at Ark with saliva on his lips and asked if he was the other examiner. When he woke up and realized what was going on, he remembered that he was on an exam and said that he was trying to farm, but it was so warm that he even accidentally fell asleep. Still in a drowsy state, the turquoise-haired guy offered Ark a fight. Ark gripped his weapon tighter and said that nothing bad had happened anyway, which meant he had no reason to give in. And finally, he would be able to evaluate the results of all his training. With those words, he rushed toward his opponent. Namely those useful training sessions with the crossing techniques the professor had taught him all those 3 months ago. Attempts to train with Carrie, during which Ark never managed to defeat her. But thanks to these 2 training sessions, he became much stronger. So the guy who fell asleep right in the middle of the exam was absolutely nothing to him in Ark's opinion. And in the flow of these thoughts, Ark pointed his blade towards his opponent with a sharp movement. But as soon as he did so, the expression on Ark's face instantly changed. The guy with turquoise hair stopped Ark's blade just still holding his katana. The professors, in turn, continued to watch on their screens. With a smile, Professor Bazin again noted that his student and Professor Lee's student had met again as if their fates were inextricably linked. Turning to Professor Bazin, Professor Lee suggested that this child was probably his student. Professor Bazin agreed, adding that this time Professor Lee's ward was unlucky to run into Han. He had previously mentioned Han's name in their conversations. This is the guy Professor Bazin found in the city of F, who is an incredible genius. However, as far as Professor Lee knew, this examinee had received a D rank. Immediately confused, Professor Bazin said that it was only because Han is very lazy. He even refused to make videos of his training for this reason. You could say that, although not intentionally, Khan has become his secret weapon. Remembering Professor Bazin's words during the battle, Han was sure that he was saying that the academy exam would be fun. And yet it seems the professor has deceived him. Han jerked the blade of his katana against Ark's shield. Ark realizes that this guy seemed to be sleepy, but then why is he moving so fast? From the very beginning, as it turned out, he met an incredibly strong enemy who knows how to make clear and strong blows. And then Ark remembered that he has a shield ability that allows him to stand an enemy that attacked him. Activating this ability, Ark felt everything inside fluttering in anticipation of the enemy's next attack. But almost immediately, Han caught the rhythm of the arch and realized that he was hiding something. Ark couldn't understand what Han meant by the word rhythm, and it made his body goosebumps of fear. While Ark was distracted trying to make sense of Han's words, he quickly seized the moment and attacked Ark sharply. His legs immediately gave out, because he had no time to react to such a precise blow. After his legs weakened, Han didn't let the moment pass, and delivered another blow this time with his foot to the stomach. The blow was so strong that Ark couldn't hold back the pain, that his face contorted with fear and pain. At this time, Professor Bazin said that it was a hidden crossing system called synchronization. It is an opportunity to experience what cannot be felt in reality, and it surpasses all sensations. Professor Lee didn't think much about the words he heard, but thought that Professor Bazin was talking to himself again. Professor Bazin had previously wondered if there was a way to increase the level of synchronization and what the limit was. Then he heard a rumor about a guy who felt something strange while in the intersection, so he immediately went to F City. And there he met Han and saw new possibilities for the synchronization level. Han then told him that if he increased the level of synchronization, he would hear them. The sound of your opponent's breathing. The number of heartbeats. All sounds that react to changes in his opponent's heartbeat. Thinking it was a cheat, Han then said it was much more boring to play that way than he had previously thought. Professor Bazin continued that Khan's synchronization affects his hearing, so he is able to learn the number of heartbeats of his opponent and understand his intentions. Plus, this guy can read the enemy's facial expressions, and there's no way Han is going to lose in psychological warfare. It's the same as if he were playing poker while watching his opponent's tricks. After saying this, Professor Bazin remarked that Professor Lee's student was very lucky, to which Professor Lee objected that it might not be true at all. With an incredibly sly look, he continued, because after all, Professor Bazin wasn't the only one with a secret weapon. At the same time, the battle between Ark and Han continued. It was already hard for Ark to stay on his feet. The guy standing across from him is incredibly strong, and there's no point in denying it. And suddenly Han stopped for a moment, his head tilted slightly downward, which meant that he had sensed something. Han noticed that his opponent's heartbeat had quickened, but he couldn't tell if it was anxiety or fear. No, that was different. His thoughts were interrupted by Ark's words that the academy wasn't so simple. He was about to meet an opponent he would have to fight in full force, and in any case, it was right to say that life is not something you plan for once. Those words put Han in a stupor. Then Ark added that he was going to use synchronization during the fight with Carrie, but before he could continue, he tried to focus. As Han rushed towards him, telling Ark that he would be vigilant, Han noticed that Ark was deliberately showing him his empty spots and provoking his attack. Usually, in such a case, one strikes where there is the highest probability of success, and Ark, in turn, assumes in advance where Khan will strike and stands and waits. Then Ark assumed a fighting stance, which gave Han the idea of that he was indeed right in his guesses, and rushed towards Ark with great enthusiasm. Han was fully confident in his abilities, but after Ark repelled his attack, he immediately doubted his previous assumptions. He couldn't believe that he had failed to deal damage to his opponent, because Han was completely sure that Ark had definitely just opened up. Han, gathering all his determination, suddenly changed his position and tried to take control of the situation. Ark noticed Han's intentions and immediately jumped up, blocking another of his opponent's attacks with his shield, which was very hard for Ark because he was incredibly strong. But Ark did not despair, and with his former diligence, tried to continue this fight, trying not to get hit by the enemy. Engrossed in another attack, Han swings his katana with incredible force. Breathing heavily and catching his breath, he suddenly notices something strange catching his attention. Simultaneously with what was happening, the professors watching were also stunned by what they saw. Professor Lee thought that Park Noah had only gotten D rank because they hadn't revealed his skills, but he would definitely become famous someday anyway. After all, it has such an incredible and unique level of synchronization. The events happening at the location of the Blazing Mountain only made it hotter, and the expression on Han's face remained as confused as before. He kept repeating in his head that he was sure that at the moment of his attack, Ark was open to being hit. But every time Han tries to attack these places, Ark constantly puts up a shield and defends himself. Han assumed that his opponent was revealing himself intentionally, but immediately reconsidering his guesses, realized that it didn't look quite right. In this case, it appears that Ark fights to see the attacks in a very short time. His interest in the situation made him ask his opponent's name, and the first thing he did was introduce himself by calling himself Khan, and Ark in turn called his own as well. Han then called Ark a capable player, and for the first time in a long time, he seemed to have more fun than sleep. Saying these words, he lowered his hand into the inventory appearing beside him, saying that he doesn't want to lose, so he will fight at full strength. At the same time, he throws an unknown ball towards Ark. He notices it immediately because the unknown object is moving straight towards him while releasing dark smoke. And just a moment later, it explodes, leaving behind a thick smoke screen. Ark immediately concludes that it was a smoke bomb and can't believe that Han may have decided to run away after what he said. But he wasn't going to run away at all, as he said, standing in a threatening pose behind Ark's back. The next second, he felt a sharp and hard blow from behind. Without realizing how this could have happened, Ark wondered how Han had been able to pinpoint his location so precisely within the smoke. And that was Han's ability, because he can detect it, because his synchronization level amplifies his hearing so that he hears absolutely everything. The sound of footsteps, Ark's frantic breathing, and even her accelerated heartbeat. Absolutely everything. Ark covered his mouth and realized that his opponent could know where he was through the sounds, and he hadn't even realized that synchronicity was capable of such a thing until now. But everything will change once he gets out of this thick smoke that hides everything around him. Suddenly, the depression next to Ark suddenly spewed out a large amount of lava. When Han heard this, he said that Ark had better not make any sudden movements, for there were lava troughs all over Blazing Mountain. Realizing the difficulty of what was happening, Park Noah realized that if he stayed in the smoke screen, his opponent would be in a better position. But how could he get out if there were lava obstacles everywhere? He knew that at times like this, he had to remain calm, and after a while, the veil would fall, and the ability to use his sword's ability would be restored. And if only he could use it well, Ark could win. And then he wondered if he'd be able to react in time if he raised the synchronization level to maximum. In the past, the professor had told Ark about a universal way to use the synchronization level called trigger. In order to use it, Ark must have some sort of habitual action. But if you think about it this way, when Ark uses the synchronization boost, he already starts it with an exhale as if to say, ha. And then with a smile on his face, Professor Lee said that meant they had decided on what training they would need to do, and if trigger was an exhalation, then you could do a breath hold trigger to stop using the synchronization level. Their goal is to use only 70 to 80% synchronization, and as the professor had said earlier, if you increase it to the maximum, Ark will definitely burn out. It is important to stop the synchronization boost in the middle so that Ark does not reach the limit, so it should be used only at the right moments in single moves, and not to increase the duration if Ark exhausts the ability he cannot win. So raising the level of synchronization to the limit is a kind of a gamble, and if he fails, he will be defeated. And if he succeeds, he has to continue the risky game, which he has to complete later on. However, if you are a professional, you should excel at it. Hearing the movement, Han immediately became alert and strained his hearing. Then he noticed that Ark had moved to the front of the smokescreen, trying to prevent Han from attacking him from behind. In addition, Ark's heartbeat had become suspiciously focused. Han immediately realized that perhaps Ark had decided to make a risky, decisive move in such a disadvantageous situation, which made him genuinely interested. Rushing from his seat, he considered whether he should go along with Ark's desire to determine the winner. At this point, Ark was trying to even out his breathing and focus on his sensations. His job was to block the attack with his shield use ability and catch Han. Ark repeated it over and over in his head. And at that moment, Han approaches him from behind at an incredible speed. Their duel at this moment was being closely watched in the royal palace. Looking at Han and Ark, the headmaster wondered why they were only D-ranked, since they looked at least A-ranked. As Jimmy Fullhouse had suspected, the professors were hiding something from him. Han's skills were astonishing in an instant. His synchronization level had increased to 300, and he also apparently had a rare synchronization that enhanced his hearing ability. That's when the professor realized that not only did Puck Noah have incredible powers, his face reflected a storm of emotions, as if a hurricane was boiling inside him. Because the principal realized that Professor Lee had a joker up his sleeve all along. He wasn't as simple as he looked. On the contrary, he was as cunning as a serpent. At this point, Han was already fully confident of his victory, for in the middle of the battle, Ark was unable to react to his approach. However, Ark only outwardly remained unperturbed, as if he didn't notice what was happening. And a second later, he blocks Han's attack with his shield ability. Han was in complete incomprehension of what was going on, how his opponent could do this if he wasn't even prepared for it. And while millions of thoughts visited his head, Ark looked in his direction with a cold look. Then a powerful wave of strength and energy reached Han with an incredible recoil sweeping through him. An ability called Stance by Ark's shield has been activated, which imposes a state of stasis on Han. And during this, Ark looked at his shield and couldn't understand how this could happen, because he couldn't recognize the enemy, but his body did it for him. Accepting what had happened, he decided to think about it later and rushed out, heading straight for Han. Ark's job was to focus on his opponent as much as possible. He then proceeded to deliver precise and accurate blows, one after the other. His face looked focused, and the blade he wielded gave him an even more determined look, as if his every swing had been calculated with precision. After a few more swings, Ark managed to land a fatal blow, after which Han said that he never thought Ark would be able to react, and this time he lost. Promising to see Ark again with those words, Han dissolved and left the examination game. And so back to reality, he slowly removed the helmet from his head. Lowering his head down, Han recalled the name of the guy who defeated him. Then he remembered Professor Bazin's words that studying at the academy could be quite fun too. But Han had dropped out of the exam at the speed of light, and he wasn't sure he'd be accepted into the academy. But in any case, he had to wait for the verdicts, and in the meantime, he was going to take a nap. At that moment, Ark's blade slams into the ground with a thud, leaving a deep mark on its surface. Gulping for air and feeling his heart pounding frantically in his chest, he realized that he had won. But at the same time, does not understand his feelings because from the use of increasing the level of synchronization, they were not the same as usual. And immediately a projection appeared in front of Ark that made it clear that it was he who had taken out the first opponent, which stunned him. He had forgotten that he had been told earlier that a ranking table would appear as soon as it did. Ark immediately started to look at the ranking that was glowing in front of him. Thinking about how strong his opponent Han was, he discovered that, like himself, Han was in a D-ranked line, which incredibly frustrated him because their skills weren't so bad that they ended up being at the lowest rank. A little oblivious to this, Ark continued to familiarize himself with the table, and as soon as he saw the picture of the S-ranked guy, he couldn't help but wonder how incredible his strength was then. And at this moment, the principal still continued to watch what was happening. Just recently, the ranking table was shown, and as Jimmy Fullhouse expected, all players started to react differently. A strange type who looked at the ranks and tried to create a further strategy. The timid type was disappointed in the rank assigned to him. The cautious type was hiding and trying to protect his rank. And people with a ferocious temper looking for a frontrunner. One of these people was Carrie, who was outraged that Ark had taken his first win over another player, and there were also players ranked higher than herself, which made her furious. Carrie, disguised in the armor of a defeated opponent, confidently prepared to fight the S-ranked player full of determination to prove her strength. So just as the director had planned, all the players were instantly interested in the highest-ranked player. Jimmy Fullhouse was thrilled with the work he and his team had done, and he was looking forward to the next steps of the S-rank examiner because the principal was very interested in how he would do next. Meanwhile, in another location that contrasted with the location Ark had fought in not too long ago, a guy with long hair and a S-rank young man with red hair met. The name of the guy with long hair was Royd, who had already gotten tired of looking for S-rank since he hid so well. To which he assumed, with a smile on his face, that Royd had come to him to take away his top rank. And his assumption was correct, for Royd did not like it when someone higher in rank than he was. And while he was saying these words, two other players came from behind the red-haired boy. But the emotion on his face did not change at all. He only said with a chuckle that he could not have imagined that there would be people in the exam who were timing. To which Royd said that the rulebook didn't say anything about banning teaming, and S-ranked, after all, shouldn't get scared and run away like a little boy. So, looking the red-haired guy in the eye, Royd ordered him quietly and peacefully to just give up his S-rank. He couldn't believe what Royd had said. Did they really think they could beat him just because they had good items or because they were outnumbered? They live in a very limited world if they think that. And King told them that they had a good chance to experience how big the world is. At this time in the royal palace, the professors in black robes either continued to observe or discussed with each other what they had seen. The projection in front of them showed all the portfolios of the examiners involved in the current showdown. Professor Seiler, who is in charge of the participants, is asked by Royd and Max about the recent actions of his students if they are not doing the timing. He didn't understand what the problem was, and the girl with glasses pointed out how cowardly his students were because they had the same rank and had formed a team and were playing a single game. In response, Professor Seiler pretended not to understand and pointed out that one of the students named Boretz was under Professor Vaughn's supervision, so he wouldn't say it was his students who were in the group. Hearing them talk, the headmaster sitting on his throne said it didn't matter at all. There really wasn't anything in the rules about timing, so it wasn't forbidden. To be honest, Jimmy Fullhouse didn't think anyone would do that during an official competition. It was entertaining enough that he was willing to forgive them. And Professor Silder responded to the girl with the glasses by saying that it wasn't against the rules, so it should be seen as their strategy. Professor Sidler's gut sort of told him that it seemed like Royd had prepared for the exam. He grew up amongst the mafia, so Royd has excellent leadership and information-gathering skills, making him a brilliant criminal, and he also has an incredible personality. So as soon as the S-ranker caught Royd's eye, he was done for good. Royd said to King's face that he didn't like the look in his eyes. Then the Boretz behind him thought he was hinting to them to attack King first. Immediately, episodes from the past began to pop into his head. If only Royd hadn't gotten wind of his father's weakness and blackmailed Boretz through him. How did Royd even know about him in reality? And yet he said that if Boretz made him first, he would get rid of that picture. So Boretz was determined, and with all the strength he had at that moment, he aimed his spear towards King, who smilingly said that what his opponent was up to was simply impossible, and at that moment grabbed his spear with his hand. Max and Royd were shocked at what was happening because they hadn't expected such an outcome. Boretz wasn't thrilled either, and he was immediately thrown into a cold sweat. Then, snatching the spear from Boretz's hands, King said that he couldn't imagine losing to the likes of them. Seeing Boretz lose his balance from a sudden movement, King trips him up, knocking him off his feet. Boretz falls to the ground with a thud, feeling incredibly ashamed and contemptuous. King says that, judging by his level, Borat's is more like a platypus. Watching this, Roy just couldn't believe that his strategy was slowly crumbling. His teeth gritted in anger and his grin stretched across his face, turning his expression into a grimace of rage. And a fraction of a second later, Roy and Max were already rushing toward King. But King quickly oriented himself, for with the blunt end of Borat's spear, he pushes Max back into his shoulder. Then, changing the position of the spear, he successfully defends himself against Royd's attack. At the same time, his face never lost its smile for a second. He was confident in his abilities as before. Subsequently, King takes one clear swing of the spear again, driving Max away from him and holding Royd with it. And then pointing at Max, says one of them is Pavian, and another one about a red wolf, clearly implying that it was Royd. Then the latter remarked that King was good at making up nonsense. At this point, Professor Seidler lost his temper and couldn't understand what was going on. The professor sitting behind him thought that perhaps Seidler had not noticed the ranks of those involved in the fight. Professor Musashi, who was in charge of the participant King, said that it is not appropriate to behave so impolitely with a stronger opponent. After all, King is the type of player who, because of his incredible power, was like a bug. According to the laws of this world, to get something you have to give up something, and even in the game, focusing on one goal will inevitably have to sacrifice something else. Ability to assess the situation level of synchronization, sense of space, reflexes, physical skills, and spirit. You can say King has the best performance in all the parameters important in VR game. He also has an ego to back it all up, and an unwavering belief in victory that gives him extra strength. And while the professors were talking, 3 stalled players rushed at King with even more force. Swinging his spear and scaring off his opponents, King says that he never even considered defeat. With those words, he disarms 2 of his 3 opponents in one deft and precise movement. And the last of them, Royd, sat on the ground. He could not at all think that a S-ranked player would be this good. And then he realized where that bad feeling had come from right after meeting King all this time. King thought of his opponents only as entertainment and never thought for a second that they could be worthy and serious opponents. Realizing this, Royd shouted insults at King with hatred and pain at the top of his voice. Professor Seidler was stunned. His eyes widened and his mouth opened involuntarily to express stunned. After all, he was watching King, who, without a drop of nervousness or fear, simply stood leaning on the sword of the opponent he had recently defeated. Professor Seidler was feverish because a student had left the exam, and Professor Bison said that after what he had seen, he was not sure that there would be anyone among the students who could resist King. The director said that King's skills were so excellent that he defeated ranked players like little children. There's a reason why King's name is King. It characterizes his skills incredibly accurately. So among all the remaining students, only the 3 on the projection in front of Jimmy Fullhouse will be able to resist him. 2 of them are Professor Lee's students, Carrie and Ark, and the third is a guy in a mask with a beak. The director said that not knowing the result until it pops up in the information window is quite interesting, and everyone in the Royal Palace will be eagerly awaiting the birth of a super player who will lead this game to an unexpected ending. Meanwhile, the rough and drylands location where the unapproachable landscape is covered in cracks. With all the strength he had, a guy with a head like a snowman ran. If he manages to run to the next location, he will be able to leave the dangerous areas. He had literally 3 seconds to do it, and he planned to do it with his foot on the ground beneath her. He makes a decisive, clear jump so that his body literally soars into the air. And at the last second, his hand is already nearing the barrier with the next safe location. But at that moment, when he was already full of confidence that he would be able to get to the harmless territories, the entire location of the rough and dry lands is suddenly engulfed in flames. And a guy with a head like a snowman and complete incomprehension of what's going on literally begins to melt before his eyes. After that, the area he was in is completely engulfed in flames that are rapidly consuming everything in the land. Meanwhile, 50 minutes had passed since the exam had begun. As the number of dangerous territories increased, and the number of active fights between the students who entered by recommendation increased, so did the number of those who dropped out of the fight. And the best of all the students who, thanks to the huge number of defeated contestants, reached first place in the overall score was King. At one point, there were only 5 contestants left in the exam. And at the Promised Land location, Carrie and Mai were at the Promised Land location, and at the Murderer's Den location, King Juo and Ark were at the Promised Land location. Ark's place was horribly dirty, and condensed water dripped from the ceiling. Ark concentrated on watching the drops of falling water, trying to catch them with his hand in order to feel every moment of their fall. And when he managed to catch one of them, it seems now the Ark's synchronization level has kicked in. Remembering that Ark himself was D rank and Carrie was A rank made him very sad. Even though he's never beaten her, it doesn't say at all that Ark should be on the lowest level of D. For starters, Ark decided to focus on the game because there is another dangerous territory here, and he has about 4 minutes to leave it. Then Ark looked out the window next to him in an attempt to reconnoiter the situation. He tried to understand what was going on outside and assess the possible risks that might await him. Then, looking around carefully, Ark spotted a red-haired guy. It was a rank Jew who was sitting in puffs of rather thick smoke. His rank meant he was as strong as Carrie, so he posed a greater threat to Ark. And while Ark was thinking about what he should do next, he noticed King, who is also at this location. This fearless S-ranked player was known for his calmness and determination. King glanced at Ark. His gaze was shrewd and calm, as if he already knew that standing up there might be of interest to him. Whereupon King cheerfully said that they now had one hidden viewer. Time was short, so King offered to postpone the fight for a while. In the meantime, Ark couldn't understand how King had noticed him since they had just had a fight downstairs. Joe responded to King by saying why he was distracted by some conversations, and by activating the Hermes shoe that gives Juo's instant acceleration ability. With anger and hatred, ordered King to leave this world as soon as possible. He then swiftly rushed in with an attack on King, as he thought he had no time to defend himself. However, a moment later, Chuo's former determination was instantly shot down. After all, his attack didn't have the expected result, as King defended himself with his blade against it. What he saw amazed Ark because it looked really impressive. This S-ranker is very relaxed, fighting against an A-ranker. The guy named Han, that they are all recommended academy students are such monsters. So watching everything that was going on, Ark began to feel a lot of excitement. Missing from sight, Ark was tormented by the question of whether he could defeat an S-ranked opponent with his D rank. And besides, why is he the one who sits and fears the rank and file alone? After all, he was determined to beat Carrie in this exam and take first place. At this time, King and Juo continued the fight, constantly reflecting the blows of each other's blades. Juo couldn't believe what was happening in front of his eyes. Why King is so good at fighting back with his so short weapon against Juo's huge blade. All the abilities that Juo has gained by playing so far and the things he's worked so hard for don't work on King. In Juo King's eyes, he was a true monster, the embodiment of strength that was impossible to deal with. At the moment of the fight, King noticed that Juo had opened up and took advantage of it to deliver a fatal blow to him. After that, all the strength and health points of the game character Juo immediately left him, and he lost the ability to continue fighting. Which surprisingly didn't make King feel much better, he just thought it was a pretty boring ending. And if the Academy had identified Juo as a rank, then according to King, conquering the Academy wouldn't take as long as he had previously thought. He couldn't understand if this was the entire level of the best educational institution in the field of gamerism. And as soon as King said those words, Ark appeared behind him, calling for the winner of the last fight to fight him. Looking at Ark with a sneer, he said that he thought he had escaped because King had seen him earlier as he suddenly disappeared. With an enthusiastic smile, Ark said he would never do that. Why would he run away when right in front of him was the shortest path to becoming the best? King, in turn, didn't take seriously the words Ark had just said. And already out loud, he said that the Academy had identified Ark as D rank. Their remaining time was 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Assuming a 1-minute walk to safe territory, they had about 1.5 minutes left to fight. King began to speculate aloud that he could finish the fight in 30 seconds. No, he was determined to finish it in 20 seconds. His words hit Ark's self-esteem and shocked him. Most likely King thought he would win so quickly because Ark was only D-ranked. The fight started literally in the next moment. King immediately tried to strike the first blow, but unexpectedly for him, the attack failed. After which he flipped his blade from his right hand to his left behind his back, and went on the offensive, directing a multitude of charged energy attacks towards Ark. Ark immediately caught the essence of what was happening. King is able to freely use the dagger with 2 hands, and each of his attacks are incredibly powerful. And the moment their daggers clashed one on top of the other, King said that even though Ark was a D rank, he was still a recommended disciple. Unable to endure this nonsensical chatter, Ark swung with incredible force and ordered King to shut his mouth. Then their blades met with incredible power, creating sparks and a deafening sound when metal collided with metal. And under the pressure of incredible force of anger and desire to win, Ark managed to knock the blade out of King's hands. But as it turned out, King managed to intercept him and clung to him even tighter than before, then pointed it towards Ark, who just couldn't contain his shock. Ark managed to dodge this attack, but was immediately followed by another. King was full of confidence that all he had left to do was finish off his opponent, and as soon as he looked up, he noticed that Ark's stance was broken, though he managed to defend himself with his shield. So, now was the right time to attack, and King aimed the sole of his boot right at Ark's face. With one precise strike from Pak Noah, Noah was thrown off balance momentarily. He literally had a footprint on his face. Ark couldn't believe that King had been able to make another attack at such a moment. While King glowed with delight, his eyes blazed with excitement, and it seemed like he was ready to throw a bunch more of those punches. They still had about 10 seconds left, and Ark was still feeling the effects of the last attack. Tears even appeared in his eyes. Ark noted aloud how fast this combo was executed. With 9 seconds left, King wasted no time in rushing towards Ark. Every next second, they counted down in turn and continued to swing their weapons in an attempt to strike a fatal blow. Ark couldn't believe that this asshole really thought he could beat him in 20 seconds. And then he remembered the professor's words, saying that adjusting the level of synchronization was like Ark pouring water into a glass with his eyes closed. If it was too low, the effect wouldn't fully manifest, and if it was too high, it would burn out. The ability to keep it at a level where it almost exceeds the required value is a synchronization control that only the best of pro gamers possess. The most important thing is to stay calm, and if Ark can control the level of synchronization, King's abilities will become simply useless. In an attempt to deal damage to Ark, King hits his shield, and then sparks fly from it with a bright glow. After all, King was affected by the stanza that Ark activated with his Golden River Shield ability. Seeing that the ruse had worked, Ark pointed his blade forward and lunged toward King. He couldn't move or react to what was happening, because Ark used the ability he had in his arsenal in time. But King also had an ability called Shining Oblivion Gum, which instantly removes the effects of Stan and sleep. Applying it, King immediately regained consciousness, and his mind cleared from the temporary confusion. So he immediately and clearly repelled the blow that was already closing in on him. Ark was shocked by what had just happened, and couldn't believe his eyes as he was in a stasis state, and King was able to use the canceling item right away. How he does all these things in a game he's playing for the first time. Meanwhile, the last second of the 20 seconds that King was going to win had expired. He couldn't believe he was capable of miscalculating the amount of time he needed. This simply couldn't happen, or the Academy judges who had given Ark a D rank had made a mistake in their selection. No matter what the reason, the fact that King didn't follow through with what he said really spoiled his mood. And a second later, he was directly in front of Ark's face. Swinging his blade with the expectation of damaging Ark, he only hits his shield. And streams of thoughts continue to rage in Ark's head, and one of them is the atmosphere around this underdog. He continues to suppress each of Ark's subsequent attacks without stopping. King kept his gaze on Ark's every step, confident and precise as he steadily closed the distance, despite Ark's attempts to fend off his attacks. He continued to intensify his onslaught and began unleashing more powerful punches, one after another. The professors watching were shocked and couldn't believe their eyes. And then Professor Musashi asked Professor Lee whether he thought the existence of geniuses was possible. But without waiting for an answer, he answered his own question by saying that he himself did not believe in such things, for if they existed, human endeavors would be useless. However, something was happening that made Professor Musashi think that perhaps it was his childish unwillingness to recognize the illogic of the world. It came to a head when he went to a friend's house to talk. His family was very prominent and helped the elite to emerge, active in many industries. The room he was taken to was impressive, for the wall on one side of it was completely covered with trophies of all kinds. And the friend, whom Professor Musashi met for the first time in a long time, began to talk as if he had been waiting for him. He said that his son, who had been boxing for 3 months, had recently competed in his first competition. And hearing this, Professor Musashi sighed involuntarily because his friend had begun to brag about his child. During the first fight, he was never hit and made it to the finals with a boxing star and a newcomer of only 3 months. Anyone would have thought it was a bluff. But because of a sharp turn in history, it started going in a completely unexpected direction. And that turn was the ill-fated drop of sweat that fell into the ring then. King didn't expect any consequences for stepping on it because he didn't even notice it. But because of her, he slipped and then immediately lost his balance, which led to King getting hit for the first time in the championship. His opponent was very happy about that because he didn't expect to do any damage to King anymore. But he was not happy for long because it made King angry, and what happened next could only be called horror. It was a true expression of cruelty in what could be called a brutal massacre. An endless sense of humiliation, hopelessness, denial of the path he's traveled. If Professor Musashi had been King's opponent, he assumed he would have felt something similar. And at some point, the hero of the story obviously became a negative character. The spectators present at the time were dumbfounded by what they saw. The mixture of ferocity and ruthless precision with which King threw his punches made them feel uncomfortable. At the end of the fight, King didn't feel a bit of guilt. He was pleased with the job done. And his opponent, who was a rising star, announced his retirement from the sport. Professor Musashi's friend then proceeded to tell him other incredible stories, and at one point, he found himself completely immersed in the way his friend praised his son. But hearing his last words, Professor Musashi couldn't help but be surprised. After all, the trophies that filled an entire wall were actually collected by a 16-year-old genius. Right in front of Professor Musashi's eyes, then was evidence of bragging that was hard to believe. And then King's father said with a mad look that he thought that in order for his son to rise even higher, he had to show him the experience of defeat. And he didn't hesitate to wonder if there was anyone in the academy who could beat his son. Professor Musashi at that moment was thinking about the genius of the boy who didn't experience defeat and his parent who still strived for more development. He didn't think there would be another family so interesting, and he was never able to answer his question. And even now, in Professor Musashi's mind, there is only one phrase he can say to his friend, and that is that he thinks there is no such person here. After all, King is so narcissistic that even in virtual reality, he created an avatar that exactly replicates his real appearance, and so far, he has lived getting what he wanted. So if something goes against his plans, he reacts very violently. So Professor Musashi sincerely wished that Professor Lee's disciple's mental state would not be broken. And just at that moment, Ark felt a strange feeling inside. That imaginary glass of water spilled, which meant only one thing. Ark immediately felt a change in his body and literally froze in place. King then makes his long-awaited first attack in the fight with Ark. King's eyes suddenly opened wide with surprise. He realized that now Ark couldn't use his synchronicity. Immediately, King grabbed Ark by the throat with incredible strength and fury. His blade even fell out of his hands in surprise, and Ark heard himself saying that without his level of synchronization, he was no good at all. King also added that because of a loser like Ark, he threw his words to the wind. And now, in the future, he will need to pay more attention to judging other people too low. It was a minute before the area became dangerous, and if they ran, they could reach safety. At that moment, Ark thought about the time spent on training and realized that he had no other strength besides the level of synchronization. However, the feeling he had was different from when he lost to Carrie. Those bright eyes Ark saw before him brought back memories for him about Hyun-jun, who had humiliated Ark in real life in the past. His gaze clearly expressed contempt and unwillingness to recognize Ark, which left a deep impression on his memory. And as Ark's avatar's health rapidly dwindled, he realized that he was once again being played for nothing. He didn't want to lose, and he didn't care if he couldn't rely on anything other than his synchronization level as long as he could prevail. Meanwhile, the already overflowing glass continued to overflow over the edge, as if symbolizing the limit of Ark's abilities. With each passing moment, the water poured faster and faster over the edge of the vessel on the table, filling its surface, until at one point, the liquid pouring out at all filled the entire table and began to spill out onto the floor. After that, and the surface of the floor began to fill with a literal sea of water. And so the table and chairs around it could no longer stand on the surface and floated in an endless amount of leached water. At that moment, Ark's hand reaches out to King's face, from which the former smile immediately disappeared. Ark's frantic look made it clear that whatever might happen next couldn't be simply predicted. His eyes glittered as if reflecting the storm of emotion and strength that was about to burst forth. A little earlier, on the Promised Land location, there were some events going on as well. A girl with purple hair named Mai was screaming as if she had seen a monster. She called Carrie a terrible monster who couldn't understand how such a weak girl could say such words while flying into Mai's face with both feet. After defeating her opponent, Carrie thought it was easier to fight with her bare hands than with weapons, and this was the third opponent she had defeated. So now Carrie only has to defeat the S-ranked guy with the nickname King and Arc, who did survive until the very end. He's doing better than Carrie could have imagined. And since the location she was in was designated as the last safe area for whoever became her opponent, Carrie would be waiting for him there. And parallel to these events, Arc's hand hovered over King's face. Tension hung in the air, and King noticed the way Arc's eyes looked at that moment. Just a second later, Arc takes a swing of his shield toward King as he bounces away. He couldn't get used to what was happening, because not so long ago, Arc had been at his limit, but now something about him had changed. It was as if his energy had come out of nowhere, and it was frightening. King couldn't figure out how it came to be a skill item. He had learned absolutely everything written in the rulebook, but there was no such thing. And this pissed King off incredibly badly, so he immediately made an attempt to attack his enemy. But Arc, as if knowing what was about to happen, dodged the attack that was aimed in his direction. He continued to dodge all subsequent possible attacks, dodging them time after time. His face expressed absolutely no emotion, and his eyes were shining even brighter than before. So it wasn't just King who was shocked to see this picture, it was Jimmy Fullhouse, who couldn't believe his eyes, if what he was seeing was really possible. The level of Arc's synchronization that was shown on the projection in front of the headmaster was rapidly increasing with every second. And the fight between Arc and King continued, but now the tension was even more intense. Every second cost them a place on the exam, because very soon the territory they were in would be destroyed. King realized that there wasn't much time left and every next move could be decisive. And in the next moment, Arc swipes his blade right in front of King with incredible strength and speed. Thus he managed to wound King, and feeling the pain, his face contorted. Now Arc was experiencing sensations he had never felt before. It was something new and unexplored, as if his soul and body had been separated, as if his feelings had taken off. He completely sensed how the opponent would move and how he himself should move. The variables that could happen in this place and even the feelings of the opponent, absolutely everything. It was as if something was telling him how he should move and with what force he should make all the following attacks. He dodged masterfully, leaving King no chance for him to land a single blow. And the next time King tries to reach for Arc with his sword, he crouches down to dodge. Arc then strikes King's liver with the hilt of his dagger with great power. Arc was not enough of his power and wanted to feel more. And the moment his synchronization level was 999 in reality, blood spurted from his nose. And in the royal palace immediately began to appear windows with warnings, because what was happening was very dangerous. Professor Lee became incredibly nervous and immediately checked on his projection to see how Arc was feeling in the real world and noticed exactly what was happening to him. He immediately began to teleport away while Professor Musashi tried to ask him what it all meant in the first place. King holding his side, and Arc still remained in the same places as before. King's face was twisted in pain, and he couldn't understand how Arc had managed to attack him with the hilt of his sword. King felt terrible. And further under the pressure of Arc's relentless attack, King planned to reach his opponent. He didn't expect to succeed with the deceptive move, but it helped him stop Arc for a second. King was starting to get mad at what was happening and the anger inside him. What should he do to destroy Arc? He'd have to think of a move if he didn't want to lose. Under the flood of thoughts, his face took on a horrifying look that was the result of hopelessness, and madness in his mad eyes reflected the inner turmoil, and his hand covered the rest of his face, as if trying to hide his pain and fear. And just as abruptly as the last time, his face changed again, only now it expressed complete incomprehension and confusion. King lowered his hands, and his gaze became blank. He stood motionless, as if he had lost all connection with what was happening. After all, he had watched Arc, who had just been overwhelmed with strength, collapse to the floor as if he had just been stunned. At this time in real life, Professor Lee ran to Pa Noah's room with incredible speed, who still continued to sit in his gaming chair with his helmet on his head. However, the traces of blood on his sweatshirt and the lowered head made Professor Lee realize that what was happening was much worse than he would have liked. And the next moment when Arc regains consciousness, even opening his eyes is very difficult for him. As soon as he managed to open his eyelids, a bright light from the room he was in hit him in the eyes. Lying in his hospital bed, Pa Noah couldn't think of where he was now. As soon as he stood up, he felt an unbearable pain in his head, and while he cringed at its sharpness, Professor Lee, sitting nearby, finally waited for Pak Noah to awaken. He told Pak Noah not to move too much. He was brought to the hospital after going into shock in the crossing, and for now, he needed to avoid exertion. Because Ark had never seen Professor Lee before in his life, he thought the man sitting next to him was a doctor. Then he said that it would be considered that he had given up in the middle of the game, but he had to fight Carrie. The professor was thinking that even at this moment, Pak Noah still remembered the game, and he was truly glad that his student was healthy. Asking Pak Noah how he was feeling, he said that, apart from the heaviness in his head, everything was fine. Then asked how long he had been in the hospital. Professor Lee said about 2 hours. Hearing this, Pak Noah said that he had to go somewhere, so he wanted to check out, and then asked if the man sitting across from him knew if the exam for the recommendation students was over. Professor Lee realized that since he and Ark had only met in the crossing, it was obvious that Ark didn't recognize him, and he said out loud that the battle was against an opponent who surpassed him in specialization. Even if it was obvious that it would be a loss, he should be ready to fiercely enter any grip. Those words, as expected, put Ark in a stupor, and after a moment, he asked the man he saw for the first time if he is Professor Hidden in the Bushes. The man says that it's the first time they've met in real life, and expresses how pleased he is to meet Pak Noah, while he looks at him with a puzzled look, because he was not at all prepared for this meeting, and told Professor Hidden in the Bushes that he looked more ordinary than Pak Noah thought he did, to which the professor said he couldn't even guess what Pak Noah thought of him. And then Pak Noah heard from the professor about what happened after he passed out. Getting right to the point, the winner of the recommended students exam was Carrie. All the other students wanted this victory, but the professor said that Carrie was very unhappy with this result. And after the battle with Ark, King was unable to leave the dangerous territory and was eliminated due to a quick death. For this reason, Carrie was not happy because she did not win after the battle with S rank that she was looking forward to and did not put any effort into it. Ark realized that he had ended up as S rank, then asked about that guy named King because it seemed to Pak Noah that he couldn't have made such a mistake. Professor Lee said that it was Pak Noah who led to this outcome, and if it wasn't for him, everything would have turned out very differently. The reason why King couldn't leave the dangerous territory is because after Ark's departure, he didn't run to the safe lands for some reason, but stayed there looking at one point. It started with how exactly Ark influenced King, and it's very controversial to give Ark a grade as a D rank, so on this exam, he showed his most unexpected side. The professor thinks that Ark shone the brightest in this exam, and this is his assessment as a spectator watching the game. His words made Ark incredibly happy, and he realized that the professor was proud of him. Further stroking Pak Noah's head, Professor Hidden in the Bushes warmly stroked his head. After all, the entire faculty had agreed to this decision, which meant that Ark had made it into Fantastica Academy. And with cries of unbelievable joy, Ark straight up jumped up in his hospital bed while the professor tried to calm him down. Whereupon a hospital robot emerged from the hallway and ordered them to be quieter in the hospital. Then Professor Lee, turning to an incredibly happy Ark, said he had something to tell him. And Professor Hidden in the Bushes' gaze immediately changed, and his expression became more serious, as if he was preparing to say something important. It was because, after waiting for a while, he said that from now on, Pak Noah would not be allowed to use the synchronization level. To which Ark couldn't even give any answer. He only knew that the level of synchronization was his only trump card up his sleeve, and that meant that he would have to learn new skills next. And so, a month has passed since then, and on graduation day at the first high school in the City D, the voices of many students could be heard in the schoolyard as they spent the day with smiles and did not miss the opportunity to take memorable photos. The girls standing in the crowd were asking the one opposite them if he had entered the Fantastic Academy. They also said that they had no doubt that he would. The one standing in front of them was Hyunjun, who said that it was just an admission and why they were so happy. They were showing genuine happiness because now they had their first acquaintance who had entered Fantastic Academy. And while the established company continued to chatter, the figure of Pak Noah appeared behind them. Hyunjun was still surrounded by the girls as they praised him, and they made sure he was admitted because the phone number he gave them said that he was really admitted. At that moment, someone called out to Hyunjun, which instantly caught his attention. The person who called out to him was Pak Noah, and immediately Hyunjun instantly became nervous. Pak Noah smilingly said towards Hyunjun that he seems to have entered this academy as well. Then turning her phone toward Hyunjun, the girl who had also run over to see what was on the screen did not hide her surprise. After all, there was Pak Noah's exam number, which meant that he had gotten into the academy by recommendation. When the other girl saw it, she said that if he had passed by recommendation, it was even cooler than regular admission. Park Noah immediately smiled happily, because this was exactly the reaction he had expected. The veins on Hyunjun's face even rose from anger, and his gaze instantly turned blank. As Park Noah turned around and walked away satisfied, Hyunjun's face immediately turned red, which was noticed by the girls around him. A new beginning means the end of a painful time and the beginning of a new life. This phrase is usually used in a positive way, but a new beginning also means separation from what has gone before, and so it was with Park Noah. The moment Park Noah was packing his things, T1 had already been just staring silently at the TV for some time. According to the rules of the Fantastic Academy, all its members must live in the dormitories that are located on its territory, and it is forbidden to bring their robots to the academy area. And so it turns out that Park Noah will not be able to avoid separation from his robot T1 and will have to leave him at home. He was sorry because he was so excited when Park Noah came home and told him he got in. But T1 seemed to be sad when the day of separation came. Park Noah will have to be separated from T1 for the next 3 years. And then thinking about all this, Park Noah, turning to T1, said that he would do well so that the robot wouldn't have to worry. Recently, he has been paying his rent on time without late payments, and he has been praised at the part-time job he has been working for some time. He has also become well-oriented, as he was able to travel alone to another city and come back. And even after he leaves for Park Academy, Noah will continue to pay rent, so while he's away from home, T1 can skimp on electricity and walk around with a full charge. Thinking back 10 years ago, when Pak's father Noah brought T1 into their family, they became fast friends with him. They played and fought together. Thinking back on it now, it seems like a lot of things happened. And when his dad disappeared and his mom was sick, T1 was always there for Pak Noah, supporting him in such a difficult time. T1 is a friend of Pak Noah's as well as his family. He has taken care of him for at least 10 years. Hugging T1 from behind, Park Noah promised him to come back in 3 years and grow up even stronger. So he really hoped his friend would wait for him. After saying these words, he was even more moved than before and cried as he hugged his robot. But the man remained silent, and when Park Noah turned to him again, he began to get nervous, for he never got an answer. And after Park Noah loosened his embrace, the robot simply fell like a breathless body. The longing that had already overtaken Park Noah was replaced by utter horror, for he could not understand what had happened. T1 still continued to lie on the floor with no signs of life. And then there was the laughter of T1, asking Park Noah what new drama he's acting out here alone. This is really the funniest show he's seen in a while. And then a small smile appeared on Park Noah's face, which was all in tears, and his gaze settled on her. Connected by a cable to T1, a phone on which an emoticon with a robot face was glowing. Park Noah didn't understand how T1 got into his phone, and the robot immediately replied that if there was a place to transfer the data, it could be transferred to any technology, so Park Noah should read the rules of operation. T1 kept laughing at him because he cries over anything and yet calls himself an adult. That's why T1 can't send him off on his own. Anyway, he's his guardian, so he's willing to walk him to the academy, and Park Noah doesn't have to worry about anything. T1 said that you never know what's going to happen when you use public transportation. The robot told Park Noah to get there 30 minutes before the start. After a while, when Park Noah reached the right place, it was already sunset outside. At the huge and beautiful building, with colored floors of the gamer faculty, dormitory at Fantastic Academy. Standing in formation were a large number of disciples, and in front of them in turn stood 3 men. And Ark, standing in the midst of this crowd, was tense because he was in front of the Fantastic Academy dormitory. At this moment, in the pocket of his jacket, T1 was encouraging him to keep his shoulders straight. Then one of the men in front shouted for everyone here to be quiet. It's 5 p.m. check-in time, so right now they're going to start checking in everyone here. The massive-looking man said that he was the dormitory manager of the Gamers Faculty of Fantastic Academy, and his name was James. If the students strictly followed the time rules in their behavior, he would have no reason to interfere. From the moment they enter the academy, they will all forget their real names and use nicknames from the crossing. Unlike others, their gamer faculty works on a rank system, and the higher the rank, the better equipment and bonuses they can get. There is bronze, silver, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, and challenger. The higher the rank, the higher floor they will be able to get a room on. They can also increase their rank through exams during the school semester and dorm scores. Everything is decided according to their ability level. There can only be 20 students with the rank of diamond and above. Depending on their rank, the environment around them will vary from a budget studio to a luxurious hotel room. Now, thanks to the messages, the students who entered in the usual way will be distributed. After they have checked these messages, each of them should wait in his room. The students who were recommended will stay here and be divided into groups according to their rank. Hyun-jun, who was standing in the crowd, immediately thought of Pak Noah, which made him really angry. And when all the regular students had already left for their rooms, the students who had been recommended were left alone with the representatives of the Fantastic Academy. James went on to say that due to the fact that the students ahead of him had shown their abilities in the Academy entrance exam, they would be given a bonus. D rank is bronze, C rank is silver, B rank is gold, A rank is platinum, and C rank is diamond. Each of them would be assigned according to their rank. At that moment, Ark realized that the ranks they had been given in the exam determined the ranks of the dormitory. And a second later, James asked if Carrie was here, and when she heard that, she put her hand up and said she was here. He walked over to James and told her that Carrie's A rank would be raised to S rank for winning the recommended student exam, which shocked everyone behind them, including Ark. As she stood in the seat she had been told to take, Carrie noticed that King was standing next to her, whom she greeted and said it was nice to meet him. King was silent, but Carrie didn't mind. She went on about how everyone was talking about how the Academy recognized him as S rank, and she wondered what his abilities were. Now, he's her fodder, so she wants him to never lose to anyone but her. But King once again didn't react to her words, which made Carrie very annoyed with her. Turning to him, she asked King if he was now trying to ignore her so blatantly. At that moment, King turned away from her and strode away. Ark was also outraged when he saw what had just happened. He couldn't understand why King had such a serious look on his face. Then he began to reason that the school was a place where, if he lost his way to leadership, it would become predator territory where danger would develop. This time, Ark was determined not to show his weak side. Just looking at him, the guys standing next to Ark had already put him down as the underperforming player. At that moment, James, who was standing at the entrance to the dormitory, became visibly alert. The cause of his alarm was King, who approached the crowd in which Ark was. The guys standing nearby who saw King approaching were surprised. One of them even remembered that King had won him during the test. The girl standing next to him noted in her head that King looked exactly like his avatar in Crossroads. James couldn't understand why an S ranker would approach a D rank group, and then King asked which one of them was Ark. After all, he had never seen what he looked like in real life. Immediately pointing a finger at himself, Ark says it's him. As soon as he said that, Ark realized that answering too quickly also looked weak, and the guy standing next to him thought, why would an S-ranked guy like that need a D-ranked kid? Then, with an ominous look, King loomed over Ark, who even staggered at such an unexpected action on the part of his former adversary. King looked at Ark, and with disdain on his face, asked if he was the same Ark that had fought him earlier. And King also added that next time, he'd be sure to win. Carrie was watching along the way. She instantly felt anger at what was happening, and her face was clearly making it known. As Ark took in a lungful of air, he tried not to show a single emotion. But in his head, he was literally shouting that he had defeated King. S-ranked King is the top rising star among the students by recommendation in the Academy. He managed to beat 8 players in the exam. He gave a superb performance as he single-handedly caught 2/5 of the examiners. So that was enough for his arrival to grab everyone's attention, and especially when he told Ark that he would win it next time everyone around was particularly interested in what was going on. King admits that he then felt like he really lost to Ark. Those standing around hearing about Ark beating King were shocked. The guy standing in Carrie's field of vision was pondering why Ark hadn't taken King's S rank from him then, or if he recognized that despite the outcome of the fight, he had lost to this guy. The eyes of everyone around him were fixed on Ark, making him very uncomfortable. Ark kept going over in his head whether he had beaten King. Then he lost consciousness, so he didn't remember anything. King's voice pulled him out of his thoughts and asked him why he didn't say anything, if he was ignoring him. Ark noticed that King seemed to be angry, so he should at least cheer him up a little first. Then he said with a smile that apparently King was a little out of shape this time. Completely ignoring Arch's words, King adds that he was then able to give his best. But that didn't upset Arch, because he noticed that he had accidentally hurt King's feelings. And it was at that moment that James suddenly approached King from behind, who ordered King to return, but if he continues to make noise, he will be given dorm penalty points. King turned around with a look of displeasure. Arch thought that school life was not going well, and James said that now everyone could go to rooms that suited their ranks. Afterward, everyone headed to the dormitory that was now their home. Entering his room, Arch's eyes lit up as he was excited to see his new home. However, it didn't live up to his expectations and his room looked rather plain. Or since they said the D ranks would get the older rooms, it was so obvious. After Arch said that, a blue-haired guy poked him in the shoulder. Arch jumped back in surprise. The blue-haired boy, noticing his reaction, said that since Arch was here, he would live in this room too. He apologized for his abruptness and asked if he could use the second floor of the bed. Arch didn't answer his question and asked if the guy already knew him. He said that they had met at an exam before and that his name was Han. When he remembered him, Arch said that he was the guy who played well even in a half-sleep. Han thanked him for his praise, if it could be called that. Han was very angry after losing to Arch, and he intends to win next time, so he suggested that Arch fight again. Then he added that he thought Arch's specialty was the level of synchronization. After that, Arch was visibly nervous, and remembered what the professor had told him, because now he could no longer use the synchronization level. Arch's thoughts were interrupted when Han turned to him and said that he would like to be friends with him. Han turned to him and said that he would like to be his friend. Han says with a smile that he'll count on Arch for as long as they live together. Arch couldn't hide his happiness, and a wide smile lit up his face. Then he said that he too would rely on Han, and it was the real Pak Noah who was happy to have a friend at school for the first time in his life. And as the sun disappeared over the horizon and the stars covered the sky, Assistant Kim inquired about the gamer faculty dormitory. Pak Noah, who was walking behind him, said that the bed was too hard and the room was cramped, which reminded him of a regular dormitory. In response, Kim's assistant laughed and added that he thought Pak Noah would get up quickly, so he should be patient for a while. Afterward, Carrie said that her room was too big and posh for her alone, and she couldn't get used to it. The bed was too soft, and she would probably be more comfortable sleeping on the bare floor. Arch was shocked to realize the difference between bronze and diamond. Arch asked Kim's assistant where they were going. He said that they were looking around the school grounds, and that he and Carrie were going to say hello to the team they were going to join. It's controlled by Professor Lee, and Assistant Kim is the coach. Their team is called the Invincible Demon Kings, which is short for NDK. The name of their organization impressed Arch, and he immediately began to smile with excitement. And they advanced through the academy courtyard and found themselves at the Crossing Capsule Center. Upon entering inside, Assistant Kim called out to Professor Lee and told him he had brought them in. Arch was absolutely thrilled with what he saw before his eyes. There were an incredible number of crossing capsules in this room. The professor hidden in the bushes who met them said they had done a good job getting here. He asked Carrie and Arch if they had heard from Kim's assistant that the three were their senior teammates that they would be joining. The first of them is Gyum Gang-hyun, his ID Fos. He looked friendly and greeted the guys and said that he was in charge of the leadership position in the NDC team, and he hopes they will become friends. The second Yoon Sol-ha, her ID is Janie. She is very friendly to look at. Then she confirmed her first impression of herself by saying that she couldn't believe that such cuties would come to their team. And the third is Ha Dok-jin, his ID Needlies. He's a silent and gloomy looking guy. After greeting all the team members, Arch said that he hoped they would take care of him and Carrie, at which point she also added that she relied on them. And Kim's assistant noticed how nervous the two were. Then the professor said that, as he thought, in order to become fast friends, they should play together. So after that, he suggested that they enter the crossing before it was too late, to start a little game of 2-on-2 competition to welcome the new students. Arch and Carrie were cautious, while Nidless, Janie, and Foss were ready for what was coming next. And by connecting to the crossing, the company found itself on a huge soccer field. Its size immediately impressed Arch, and he immediately started looking around to get a sense of its scale. The youth team will play against the old guys. If they quarrel on the first day, they can spoil each other's mood, so they will have a better soccer match. The team consisting of old members included Foss and Needless. And to balance the number of participants, Janie decided to become an observer, promising to support all teams. Professor Lee said that even though this game looks like a soccer game, it's a chance for Carrie and Ark to determine the avatar's skills and vulnerabilities in the game, and in the future, they'll be a team, so they should get to know each other. After that, Carrie kicked the ball right in Ark's face. Meanwhile, Planet Man was explaining the rules of the game. The settings were designed so that if you attack the ball with another part of your opponent's body instead of his legs, he would be grounded for 5 seconds. Plus, each of them may notice that they have 2 item slots. If they get items randomly appearing in different places on the map, they can use them in their slot. Their match will start after a rebound, and the team that first manages to score 5 points will win. Carrie, determined to win, turned to Ark and said that if she got into the academy, she wasn't going to lose to anyone, not counting her comrades King and Ark himself. So since they're doing it, they're bound to win. Ark agreed with what she said and noted that he wasn't going to lose either. When Foss heard this, he said that Carrie and Ark seemed to be underestimating them. Needles responded by saying that it was rumored that Carrie had gotten first place in the exam among the students by recommendation. So now Needles was determined to show her a master class. Foss was nervous and told his comrade to remember that this was first and foremost a welcome to the newcomers to their team. At this time, Janie, who was sitting on the bench, was asking Professor Lee who he thought would win this match. He said that, given the state they are in now, the old guys will probably win. But if nothing like that happens, maybe the young ones will have a chance to succeed. Then Janie became nervous, because she couldn't understand what could go wrong in the future. Planet Man's voice interrupted all the dialogue and thoughts here. He loudly, and with genuine enthusiasm, announced the start of the first game so that his voice echoed throughout the field. A ball bouncing far up off the floor gave the boys confirmation of the start of their game. Foss was determined to at least show the newcomers how incredible their sunbays were. As soon as he thought about it looking at the ball, his face contorted with bewilderment as he saw it. Carrie soared into the air for the first shot on the ball in the game. Ark also made no secret of the fact that he was amazed at Carrie's speed and clearly hadn't expected such an action on her part. And she was right in the air and said she'd be the first to take a point for their team. A second later, she was almost touching the ball, her foot in the air, ready to deliver a powerful blow. Making a sharp and confident movement with her foot, Carrie kicked the ball with such force that it flew straight toward the goal, leaving no chance for a return block. The ball was hurtling straight into their and Ark's goal, and time seemed to slow down as it approached the goal. Carrie, proudly looking at the ball in her head, noted that its trajectory of her shot was pretty good. After a second, however, there was no joy left on her face, for she had noticed an arm outstretched right in front of the sword that had already pretty much given her team their first score. The man who prevented the first goal caught the soccer ball as if hugging it. Carrie's thoughts were jumbled. She couldn't understand what had just happened. Those who were watching and even present at the game were also dumbfounded by what was happening. And Ark wasn't the only one of them who silently froze and watched intently. The mysterious goalkeeper holding a soccer ball. Nidless was lying on the floor behind all the participants and used the summon goalie ability. The summoned goalkeeper fights off all hits for 5 seconds and appears immediately after using the ability. Carrie realized it was only a moment, but Needless professionally managed to use the object with the goalie in time, whereupon Nidless said without a drop of emotion that they were the first juniors here. He was then grabbed by Foss, endlessly praising what his co-commander had just done. Janie immediately shrieked that Needless was the ace of their team. Professor Lee, who was watching with admiration, noticed that Nidless didn't even seem surprised by Carrie's reaction and searched for the object and used it anyway. Professor hidden in the bushes was sure that Carrie was the quickest to react when the ball went up. However, at this moment, it was neither four remained the most calm in this situation. At the moment when it was already obvious that Carrie was going to hit the ball, Nidless determined the location of things and found the quickest way to activate the item with the goalkeeper. Especially before Carrie's ball took off, he accelerated with a double. So Needles used the slip and had great difficulty in getting it in time. His ability to instantly assess what's going on is beyond the realm of reason. Foss pointed out that he doesn't even hold back in competitions against the younger ones, to which Nidless said that he would be ashamed to lose anyway. Carrie and Ark stood with incomprehensible expressions on their faces, still unable to realize how Nidless had made a decision in such a short time. And now their tactics have changed. They've divided up the duties, and Carrie is now in charge of Needles, and Ark is in charge of Foss. The last of them said, with an incredibly satisfied look, that his teammate had already shown Carrie and Ark what he was worth. So now, it was his turn. Ark, who was in charge of Fosasunbai, noticed that he was very skillful with the ball. Foss then deftly wrestled it away and threw it over Ark before he even had time to realize it. Foss said with a smile that he often plays soccer in his normal life. After a second, Carrie started to get indignant because she didn't understand why Ark was hovering and not running after Foss. Ark was thinking that even if he broke the rules, he had to get the ball back first. He hoped to knock Foss off his feet, but as soon as he noticed Ark's maneuver, he jumped up. The moment Foss discovered he had nowhere to stand after the jump, he made the decision to use Ark's face to push off for his next movements. And while his opponent, dazed, stunned, continued to lie on the field, Foss continued to drive the ball. With one accurate and sharp kick on the ball, he scored the first goal of the game. Foss, showing a thumbs up, was happy to get at least 1 point to start with. Carrie's anger had no limit, for he and Ark could have gotten the first goal even earlier than the team and their opponents. And running up to Ark, Carrie began to resent him for not coming to his senses. Ark had just conceded a goal, and he was so happy about it that he was just lying there. In fact, the reason he couldn't move was because of the stanza. Carrie was screaming and trying to impress upon Ark that they were sure to score this time, so he'd better get his act together. Rising from the floor, Ark thought about the fact that if he used the synchronization level, he would definitely be able to stop them. Professor Lee, who was controlling the events, immediately realized what Ark wanted to do and began to give him all sorts of signs that it should not be done. Ark knew this even before the exam for the students on the recommendation that it would not be possible to survive in the academy with only synchronization. So Ark worked hard to create a new weapon. Seeing his efforts, Carrie tried to cheer him on in every way possible. There was hope in Ark's eyes. He would do anything to become stronger. And then the ball is snatched out of his grasp by Needles at breakneck speed. Then scoring it into the goal earns a second goal for his team. As soon as that happened, Carrie started yelling at Ark with renewed vigor, because how could they be if he kept making mistakes at a time like this? But it was at that moment that something came up that Ark understood well. In an attempt to deflect a pass going from one opposing player to another, Ark misses again. Subsequently, they are added another point and their score becomes 3-0. Then Carrie tries to kick the next ball, but it hits her foot and goes straight into the goal. And then when Carrie's face can no longer contain her anger, their score becomes 4-0. At this point, Ark couldn't muster up. He just became a stupor looking on. Foss's figure loomed over him, and that's when Ark realized how weak he was without a level of synchronicity. Still, Ark had no choice but to use it, so he immediately tried to even out his breathing. Noticing this, Professor Lee ordered his team to stop this game. Then he stood up from the bench, watched by the others, and headed in their direction. Saying that they had learned enough about each other, Professor Lee said that they should stop imitating the competition. That didn't make Carrie very happy, but Foss and Needles had no negative emotions, and Ark stood behind them, puzzled, trying to catch his breath. Then Carrie came up to him, and you could tell she was ready to fight for the outcome of the game. Foss, watching them, noticed their emotions after losing in this kind of competition, which meant they were very eager to win. Without a doubt, Foss realized that two good guys had come to see them, and then with a clap of his hands. He said it was good to feel disappointed after a defeat, but if it was all over, you had to give some kind of feedback. And then Ark and Carrie looked at each other. Foss realizes that Ark is worried, but he can't win if he's so confused. It seems like he needs to compete more often in competitions like this. Foss then turned to Carrie, saying that even if the game doesn't go well and she doesn't win, just by blaming everything on her partner, she's venting her anger, which is also wrong. Inside the academy, their NKD team is a strong contender to win against other teams. For this reason, Carrie and Ark will need to become stronger than they were at the moment. For a player, fortitude is also important, and if you shake because of 1 or 2 losses, you can never win. Turning to them, Carrie asked with a smile if they really win so often. After all, the professor's team was really very strong. Since they're so powerful, they'll probably be considered at the top of the academy. With an excited look, Foss replied that their team was in 10th place last year. Carrie's face changed immediately. She couldn't believe what she had heard, because she had heard that there were only 10 teams at the academy. After a little more thought, her expression took on an even more intimidating look. After all, Professor Lee's team was ranked last out of all the teams. And while the collective was speculating about this, Professor Lee turned his attention to Ark standing beside him. He immediately noticed that his student's gaze was panicked and his head was down. Upon arriving at the dormitory, Noah immediately laid down on the bed in his room. He was nervous after everything that had happened the day before. He was pulled out of his thoughts by T1's voice, which asked why his friend was so worried. He said he's kind of not worried, just wondering if he'll be okay if things continue like this. Ark immediately remembered the words of Professor Lee, who had said that he was now forbidden to use the synchronization level. At the hospital, he had mentioned that it was originally possible to change its value only slightly, and Ark's level is undergoing a strong metamorphosis. At first, his synchronization of 300% reached 500% and then grew to 999%. Perhaps by reaching this value, Ark had surpassed the mark, but they had only seen the upper limit. Professor Lee also suggested that Ark was overexerting himself, and it was because of this that he thought it might be dangerous for him to use the increased level of synchronization. Ark resented the idea of being in the intersection without synchronization, after which Professor Lee continued with the words that Carrie's synchronization level is 103%. Not an elevated synchronization level is 100%, and this value is almost equal to it. But Carrie had never once used it to justify her weakness. Professor Lee didn't tell Ark that he couldn't use the synchronization boost at all, but only until they discovered its secret and learned how to control it. There's a professor at the academy who's an expert in this field who's willing to help. Crisis is a chance. Professor Lee took the opportunity to advise Ark to give up on games dependent on the level of synchronization and let him think of it as a good chance to find new features. Ark knows he's not as agile as Fos Sunbae. He can't read the situation as well as Nidless Sunbae, but Ark still knows that in the future, he will definitely be able to do it. And so, when a new sunny school day at Fantastic Academy had already begun, in one of the classrooms sat a class of Zs who were new to the institution. In front of them stood a girl with glasses, who greeted them and introduced herself as Sora. She would be teaching them sports disciplines and fighting techniques that they would be able to practice in the crossing. Ark, who was sitting in the audience, also noticed that the first day was very exciting. Ark was in the same class as Han and Carrie, which pleased him. It meant he knew someone he knew, so he wouldn't be so scared. Classes at the Fantastic Academy take place both in reality and in the intersection. In reality, the theory of intersection and controlling one's mental and physical states is studied. In the intersection, they study the game of techniques and train avatars and so on. After these words, Ark immediately tensed up because he was looking forward to the first class at the crossing, but he couldn't even guess what awaited them there. Professor Sora said that since today was their first day, they would be measuring their base strength without stress. The thesis explains that although in intersection, they use an avatar, physical health from reality also affects it. Being in the virtual world for long periods of time does not stress the body enough, so exercise is necessary for health. Immediately, she suggested that the students change into the sports uniforms issued to them yesterday. Heading into the holographic gym at Fantastic Academy, already changed into their sports uniforms, the students were measuring their reaction speed under the supervision of Professor Sora. While doing so, Ark was so focused that there were even droplets of sweat running down his face. And then he felt a sudden projection behind him. Ark deftly turned around and extended his arm in her direction, thus marking her. He did it many more times because that's how the reaction speed measurement system worked. Then there was the next exercise to measure the physical strength of the students. It was pull-ups. Ark tried very hard to do this exercise, and when he finished it, he did the final pull-ups with his last strength. Next was the measurement of muscular endurance. In simple words, it's running. Ark's performance was that his reaction time was average. His pull-ups were also average, as was his 50-meter run. Overall, Ark's performance was average. Just like Professor Lee had told him earlier, he didn't exercise every day for nothing. Looking at Han, Ark told him that he had been sleeping during the entrance exam, and that here he was, also napping. Afterwards, when I asked Han what his results were, the answer didn't take long. All of his scores were high, and he said that he almost fell asleep while doing these tasks, so he did everything half-heartedly. Trying to take in the information he had just received, Ark looked to the side to find that one of the students was very adept at performing the tasks assigned to him, which made Professor Sora marvel. Even she couldn't believe what she saw in front of her. 30 out of 30 hits was the highest score Carrie had gotten. Carrie thought about the fact that if she had the highest score, it meant she was in first place. That made her very happy. Ark realized that in reality, Carrie wasn't so simple. As he looked at her, Han, who was standing next to Ark, noted that she was very famous in F-Town, and he has no idea if Ark knows that the environment in City F is completely different. It's a place where people who lost everything in other cities and ran away gather. It's also home to criminals and a huge number of abandoned children. Despite this, there is a reputable organization that was created in a place as bleak as F-Town for the survival of abandoned children. Little by little, it has grown so large that even adults can't underestimate it. And Carrie was the head of that place. That's why so many people knew her. It was then that Ark realized just how heavy a past Carrie had behind him. Then, approaching Ark, Carrie asked him if he had finished his tasks. Startled by her arrival, he said that Carrie had done a good job, addressing her formally, whereupon she was very surprised. And when she sat down next to Ark, asking him if he'd heard about that there are 10 teams in the academy, and each team has between 20 and 50 participants. Therefore, it is said that the team is usually divided into first and second sub-teams. But their group doesn't even have any candidates, and there are only 5 people who could hardly play against each other. Plus, last year they were in last place in the last year's rankings. Carrie, looking at Ark, suggested that their team might be in some kind of trouble. Ark agreed with her after a moment's thought, but the sun was already sinking below the horizon. Fos, in his sweats, still occupying the hall, heard a voice behind him calling his name. It was Janie claiming that Fos was the best member of the gym. He responded by saying that if he didn't move, his body would get really sore. And yet, if you do everything in moderation, you can't ruin your body. Nidlis then asked Fos what he thought of the newcomers this time. Upon hearing this question, Fos said that he didn't think Ark and Carrie could squat, to which Needless said that he didn't squat at all. Carrie may be a little rough, but in terms of physicality, she was the best. And Ark had something to hold on to, and you can say that because of his shortcomings, you start to expect a lot from him. Listening to this, Needless said he wasn't even asking about abilities. They all saw their faces last night at the competition when they talked about their grades. It looked as if the newcomers might leave altogether. Nidlis wondered if it would be better to recruit the regular students before the situation worsened. If it continues like this, can it end up like last year's incident? And Fos, as if to refute Nidlis's words, said that it was Professor Lee who chose these two. And even if some of their team didn't believe in Ark, and Carrie Fos suggested they believe in the professor's choice. After all, he must have a reason to choose them. But those words didn't exactly reassure Needles. Carrie looked at him with a frightened look, because she couldn't even think of such a thing before, because she really liked the newcomers in their team. Whereupon Janie staggered away from the gym with an oodles of thoughts. She was thinking that maybe they should discuss all this with the professor, because if this kept up, things would start coming apart before the season even started. Everyone seems more receptive from last year, but they didn't do poorly because of a lack of effort. Without finishing her thought, Janie's gaze drifted to the window, and she found Carrie standing downstairs with a tall, black-haired guy. It was Matthew from the Viper Elementals. He was asking Carrie if she'd gotten first place on the recommendation exam. Without waiting for an answer, he offered to get straight to the point and invited Carrie to join his team. Carrie asked Matthew again what he meant. At the same time, Janie watched the scene from above with shock. Carrie said she was a student of Professor Lee's recommendation, to which Matthew pointed out that referral students could change teams too, but unlike regular students, they have a penalty in the form of a 1-year ban from tournaments. Besides, Professor Hidden in the Bushes is famous for forming a team with only poor people. That's why they call NKD Academy losers, and if Carrie goes to Matthew's team, which finished second last year, he can avoid that fate. Matthew also promised her a sponsorship to support the players. After that, Carrie wondered, and then she asked how much Matthew's team could give her. When she heard that, Janie tensed up even more than before. Matthew was already smiling happily, thinking that Carrie had fallen for his offer. She visibly unnoticed Matthew listening to his plan cautiously, and under Janie's supervision, their conversation continued at the same pace. A lot of thoughts were going through her head, and one of them was whether Carrie was going to leave the team. She was distracted from her thoughts by Needless's voice coming from behind her. He asked her what she was looking at. Janie was startled by his sudden appearance and even shouted at him, ordering him not to look at what was happening. Whereupon he immediately noticed what Janie had been watching all along. And then Matthew asked Carrie how much she wanted to get then. And in his head, he was sure his plan would succeed. He thought that all slum dwellers lost their minds at the mere mention of money, and she herself would join them if they gave her 1 or 2 million won. Then Carrie said that with a little math, Matthew's team should at least give her at least 1 or 2 million. As Needles waited for what I would say to Carrie, his face twisted with an expression of disgust. And a second later, when he heard that Carrie had asked Matthew for 10 billion, Needles' eyes rounded with shock. Carrie continued that only on the condition that Matthew give her 10 billion would she consider his offer. Matthew's mouth dropped open in indignation and shock. How could a poor girl like Carrie make such terms for him? But Carrie couldn't understand why Matthew was so surprised. It's the amount of money that just comes out of the calculation. After all, she would lose her pride as a professional, and also, because of this choice in the future, when she becomes a superstar, she will get a lot of disapproving comments. But what's most important about all of this? If you add a fee for her to hand over the professor who found her and gave Carrie a chance in the past, which despite the fact that Carrie was a helpless orphan left in the slums of City F, he's the one who saw potential in her, and he's the one who changed her mind, saying she has the ability. Carrie should have a chance too, and though she's been held back by her environment so far, now she should get what she couldn't. After which he suggested that she discover her abilities at the Fantastic Academy. With all that, Matthew's team owed Carrie at least 10 billion, just a fraction of what the future superstar would earn. What Carrie had just said was causing endless anger inside Matthew. And when his nerves got the best of him, he lunged toward Carrie, whom he called crazy. Does she think he looks like some kind of simpleton to her? Then he tried to stab Carrie directly in the face, but she deftly dodged it. And firmly, with a strength Matthew clearly hadn't expected, she intercepted his arm. Carrie then hacked him up and pressed his face into the tiles beneath their feet. Then she said that in F-Town, she had stood up to the likes of Matthew countless times. The opinion of the well-to-do, that money can buy everything. It was completely disgusting for her, and with those words, she twisted his arm even more. He started screaming that he was giving up, and Needless silently watching them from above couldn't believe his eyes. And then everyone within the confines of the showdown was distracted by a voice calling Carrie's name. It was a dumbfounded-looking Ark, who noticed what Carrie was doing now. Immediately, he rushed toward Carrie, saying that violence is bad and that she should stop doing it immediately. He was intent on stopping her, but Ark was in such a hurry that he tripped over a rock sticking out of the ground. Clearly not expecting this turn of events, he began to fall with fear in his eyes. And Matthew, who was lying on the floor, tensed up even more when he saw it. That Ark's swift, fast fall lands precisely on his head. The pressure immediately made Matthew's nose bleed. Ark did an involuntary elbow drop to the side of his opponent's head. Carrie immediately started laughing at Ark because he had just elbowed his sunbae in the fall, but he immediately started to defend himself, saying that he was trying to stop Carrie, and she praised Ark for actually helping her. Then they decided to move Matthew aside so that he would wake up a little later. When Carrie and Ark had already taken the arms and legs of Matthew, who was unconscious, they noticed witnesses watching them from above. It was Nidless Sunbae and Guinesobe, who clearly didn't expect to be noticed. Afterward, they called Arch and Carrie to come upstairs for a serious talk, and they headed together to the gymnasium where Foss was still in. He was covered in sweat from his workout and couldn't figure out what those in front of him wanted him to do. Teammates. But then he heard that the rookies knocked Matthew out of the Vipers. Then Jeannie started berating Foss for still practicing, and he doesn't know the meaning of words in moderation at all. She added not to worry about Matthew, the guys had hidden him, but Fosu's problem was that he'd blacked out Needly said Ark had hit him hard on the head, and there would be no witness problems. Right after, Fos asked what the team wanted his permission to do, and then they asked if they could tell their newcomers about what happened last year. Fos said he didn't think Needlys would be the first to talk about it, and he was wondering if he should tell Carrie and Ark too. And then, addressing the new Fos, he mentioned that their team had previously told Ark and Carrie that their team had come in last place last year, and there was a reason for that that had nothing to do with their abilities. Originally, the place called Fantastic Academy was a school for the elite that was attended by the children of high-ranking people. And it was the system of enrollment by recommendation, and Professor Lee in particular, that stemmed the tide. Then Foss asked if the boys knew that all the students chosen by the professor on the recommendation were from the cities D, F, and Z. Ark immediately assumed that their teammates were also from those cities. But Foss went on to say that although City D is now in the process of development, cities F and Z are too far removed from this generation and are called slums. So if you compare them to City A, you'd think they're from completely different worlds. Because of this, Professor Lee caused a stir at the academy, and there were forces opposing his admission on the recommendation of the slum students. They even pushed for the professor's complete resignation. But as if contradicting all the accusations, the professor and NKD had performed very well every year. It was the same last year when Foss was a sophomore. Their team of 5, with no substitutes, included a third-year student preparing to become a professional and 2 newcomers who had placed first and second in the recommendation exam. Their team became so strong that they beat everyone at every competition without stopping. They were discussed as the strongest contenders to win, so their existence could not be ignored by the other teams. And then came the very incident that Foss was going to tell us about. One student from first year, who had joined them then with Needles, suddenly announced his will to leave the team. And even though everyone tried to talk him out of it and change his mind, he just said one phrase and left. He apologized, but said without a trace of regret that he just needed to grab the chance he was given. And then they heard that he moved to another team after receiving a large sum of money. The parents he betrayed Professor Lee and their team, who trusted him completely. Before the start of the season, they were unable to find additional players, so they had to play with 4. They played in a similar lineup in games where they should have had 5. As a result, they got the very last place. The academy is very different from what Ark thought of it, and now there's something else he's thinking about now. Perhaps that was the point of the professor's question. What would Ark do if he was playing an enemy with a wider range of abilities? Does he have the spirit to keep fighting an opponent he's sure to lose to? Their job is not only to beat the other academy teams, but also the limited views of the people targeting them. While Needless didn't like the guy who betrayed them and abandoned their team, he was also annoyed by the great elite of the Fantastic Academy. And he told the newcomers not to give in to the loud cries that everyone who grew up in unfavorable conditions is a loser. After all, if you crush them all and win, they won't even be able to squeal anymore, Needles said with an intimidating look. Hearing him say that, Carrie realized that now the guys trusted them too. And just seconds later, Ark shouted at the top of his voice that he didn't want to lose either. He's not going to lose to other academy teams, and he's certainly not going to succumb to the views that despise him. Even though right now Ark still lacked the strength to wait, there wasn't much left to wait. And he's going to ace it by all means and lead their team. The T1 that appeared on the screen of Arka's cell phone even brought a tear to his eye, because now there was nothing left of the little boy he had known before, because Pa Noah had grown up. But Ark's words angered Carrie and Needles, for the 2 already considered themselves the aces of the team. Seeing their faces, Ark thought he might have overdone it and said something unnecessary in the moment. And then Needles and Carrie jumped on him and started arguing about the title of best player on the team. Needless looked at Carrie and said that she had lost last time and should know how to temper her fervor. She said she wouldn't lose to Nidless Sunbai in a one-on-one battle. Shouting Needles told Carrie to go to the crossing now, and he would show her where she really belonged. And parallel to that, it was already evening. The setting sun filled the room Professor Lee was in with its soft light. He was unaware of the ongoing arguments between his teammates while relaxing and drinking coffee. At this time, Matthew, who was lying on one of the flower beds, woke up and couldn't remember how he came to be in this place. The next morning, Ark looked up and was surprised to find it there. A huge projection with an announcement that floated right in the air. Ark realized that the opening ceremony for the ICS Academy competition was in a week. Apparently, they're holding it in a crossroads style of party. Last season, it was PvP 5-on-5 in the world of Heroes of Time. If you think about it, Ark has been playing other games more than Time Heroes these days, so he decided to try his best to practice PvP today. That same day, in one of the classrooms of the Fantastic Academy, the professor was already giving his lecture. Today, Professor Seiler's goal in designing the worlds was to tell us more about the world of crossing. VR world satisfies many parameters from reality. With the development of intersection, great changes have emerged in human life. The greatest of these was the disappearance of spatial limitations, and thus the so-called world became possible. After the concept of the world was introduced, separate universes with singular goals began to be created, such as the gaming world, the office world, the banking world, and so on. In this way, there were conveniences that could not be compared with reality. A lot of economic markets have been moved from reality to the intersection, and following that, the world has evolved too. Like if you become the master of the universe, you can feel like a god. And then Professor Seiler made the students float in the air. And then he brought them back down to the ground just as abruptly, so much so that Ark fell face down. From now on, all students will try to plan the world. In other words, they will try to design it. By doing so, they will try to create their own individual world. Everyone immediately started looking at the spheres they had been given for the task. Taking it in his hands, Ark realized that he had absolutely no idea what kind of world he could make. And then Han came up to him saying that he had already finished the task set before him. Whereupon he began to show Ark his sphere of peace, in which there was a humidifier showing the humidity index, which was very important for sleep. Ark had no doubt that Han, who liked to sleep, would emphasize something like that. Then he turned his attention to Kari, who was also trying to cope with the creation of peace. And Ark was excited and decided to go up to her and ask her how she was doing, and accidentally bumped into the blonde-haired guy. Immediately, Ark apologized to the guy for inadvertently hurting him. He turned around and noticed that the blonde guy's face was distorted, and he was clearly angry, and immediately called Ark a disgusting thing, which set off a storm of emotions and thoughts in his head. Ark looked after the blonde-haired boy who was walking away in complete incomprehension of the situation that had just occurred. And then Ark's eyes widened more. He finally realized what? Everything his sonbei said was true. The local elite really didn't come close to the natives of DF and Z cities. Their cold gazes seemed to have been directed in their directions for what seemed like an eternity. This was the very prejudice that was spreading through the academy. A few days later, on the day of the ICS opening ceremony, the entire team of the Invincible Demon Kings were already prepared for the upcoming event. Ark was very nervous because it was a pretty important ceremony that he really wanted to attend. A little earlier, when the entire team and Professor hidden in the bushes were sitting in his office, they discussed the fact that Carrie and Ark had never tried playing MOBA mode before. Nidless said it was true because they had no idea that there were people who didn't play the most popular games and modes. At that point, the competition is only a month away, and at the time when other teams start to postpone their teamwork, the NKD team will have to train. They have a whole month, and that means everything is going to be fine and they have to get everything done. In MOBA mode, the basis of crossing and the way the avatar is used is the same, so Carrie and Ark will get used to it quickly. For this purpose, the 5 of them will develop teamwork 3 days a week, and the rest of the days will be training in Carrie and Ark's MOBA mode. Fos and Janie will be in charge of Carrie, and Nidless will be in charge of Ark. Professor Lee relies on them and hopes that they will be able to explain everything about the regime to the newcomers.